Okay. Blithe
Have fun, everybody.
Definitely. Blithe Spirit, Act 1, Scene 1. The scene is the living room of the Condamine's house in Kent. The room is light, attractive, and comfortably furnished. There are French windows opening to the garden. There is an open fireplace. At back, there are doors leading to the hall, the dining room, the stairs, and the servants' quarters. When the curtain rises, it's about 8 o'clock on a summer evening. There is a wood fire burning because it is an English summer evening. The doors are open, the windows are closed. The curtains are partially closed. Edith comes in from the hall carrying, rather uneasily, a large tray of cocktail things. She comes to the table with a tray of drinks. She sees there is no room, so puts the drinks on the table with a sigh of relief. Ruth enters briskly. She is a smart-looking woman in her mid-30s. She's dressed for dinner, but not elaborately.
That's right, Edith.
Yes,
Now you'd better fetch the ice bucket.
yes,
Did you manage to get the ice out of those little tin trays?
yes, I had a bit of struggle though, but it's all right.
And you filled the little trays up again with water?
Yes,
Very good, Edith. You're making giant strides.
yes,
Madam McCarty, Mrs. Bradman, and I will have our coffee here after dinner, and Mr. Condamine and Dr. Bradford will have theirs in the dining room. Is that quite clear?
yes,
And when you're serving dinner, Edith, try to remember to do it calmly and methodically.
yes,
As you are not in the Navy, it is unnecessary to do everything at the double.
very good.
Now go and get the ice.
Yes,
Not at a run, Edith.
yes,
Edith goes. Ruth crosses to the fireplace, gives a comprehensive glance around the room. Charles comes in and moves to the back of the sofa. He is a nice-looking man, about 40, wearing a loose-fitting velvet smoking jacket.
No sign of the advancing hordes?
Not yet.
No ice?
It's coming. I've been trying to discourage Edith from being quite so fleet of foot. You mustn't mind if everything is a little slow motion tonight.
I sure welcome it. The last few days have been extremely agitating. What do you suppose induced Agnes to leave us and go get married?
The reason was becoming increasingly obvious, dear.
Oh, yes, but in these days, nobody thinks anything of that sort of thing. She could have popped into the cottage hospital, had it, and popped out again.
Her social life would have been seriously undermined.
Well, we must keep Edith in the house more.
Edith comes in slowly with the ice bucket.
That's right, Edith. Put it down on the table.
yes,
I left my cigarette case on my dressing table, Edith. Would you get it for me?
yes, sir.
Edith runs out of the room.
There now.
You took her by surprise.
A dry martini, I think, don't you?
Ruth takes a cigarette from the box on the mantelpiece and lights it, crosses and sits in the armchair. Charles is mixing cocktails.
Yes, darling. I expect Madam McCarty will want something sweeter.
Well, we'll have this one for ourselves, anyhow.
Oh, dear.
What's the matter?
I have a feeling that this evening is going to be awful.
It'll probably be funny, but not awful.
You must promise not to catch my eye. If I giggle, and I'm very likely to, it will ruin everything.
Oh, you mustn't. You must be dead serious and, if possible, a little intense. We can't hurt the old girl's feeling, however funny she is.
But why the Bradmans, darling? He's as skeptical as we are. He'll probably say the most dreadful things.
I've warned him. There must be more than 3 people, and we couldn't have the vicar and his wife because A, they're dreary, and B, they probably wouldn't approved at all. It had to be the Bradmans.
Edith rushes into the room with Charles's cigarette case.
Thank you, Edith. Steady does it.
Yes, sir.
Edith, with an obvious effort, goes out slowly.
We might make her walk about with a book on her head like they do in the deportment lessons.
Charles comes right of Ruth and gives her a cocktail. Then he moves to the fireplace.
Try this.
Lovely. Dry as a bone.
To the unseen.
I must say, that's a wonderful title.
If this evening's a success, I shall start on the first draft tomorrow.
How extraordinary it is.
Oh, what?
Oh, I don't know. Being right at the beginning of something. It gives one an odd feeling.
Do you remember how I got the idea for The Light Goes Out?
Suddenly seeing that haggard, rattled woman in the hotel at Biarritz. Of course I remember. We sat up half the night talking about it.
She certainly came in handy. I wonder who she was.
If you ever recognized that description of herself. Poor thing. Here's to her anyhow.
Another.
Darling, it's most awfully strong.
Never mind.
Used Elvira to be a help to you. When you were thinking something out, I mean.
Every now and then when she concentrated, but she didn't concentrate very often.
I do wish I'd known her.
I wonder if you'd have liked her.
I'm sure I should. As you talk of her, she sounds enchanting. Yes, I'm sure I should have liked her because, you know, I've never for an instant felt in the least jealous of her. That's a good sign.
Poor Elvira.
Does it still hurt when you think of her?
No, not really. Sometimes I almost wish it did. I feel rather guilty.
I wonder if I died before you'd grown tired of me, if you'd forget me so soon.
What a horrible thing to say.
No, I think it's interesting.
Well, to begin with, I haven't forgotten Elvira. I remember her very distinctly indeed. I remember how fascinating she was and how maddening. I remember how badly she played all games and how cross she got when she didn't win. I remember her gay charm when she had achieved her own way over something and her extreme acidity when she didn't. I remember her physical attractiveness, which was tremendous, and her spiritual integrity, which was nil.
You can't remember something that was nil.
I remember how morally untidy she was.
Was she more physically attractive than I am?
Oh, that's a very tiresome question, dear, and fully deserves the wrong answer.
We are very sweet.
Thank you.
And a little naive, too.
Why?
Because you imagine that I mind about Elvira being more physically attractive than I am.
I should have thought any woman would mind if it were true. Or perhaps I'm old-fashioned in my view of female psychology.
Not exactly old-fashioned, darling, but just a bit didactic.
Oh, how do you mean?
It's didactic to attribute to one type the defects of another type. For instance, because you know perfectly well that Elvira would mind terribly if you found another woman more attractive physically than she was, it doesn't necessarily follow that I should. Elvira was a more physical person than I. I'm certain of that. It's all a question of degree.
I love you, my love.
I know you do, but not the wildest stretch of imagination could describe it as the first fine, careless rapture.
Would you like it to be?
Good God, no.
Wasn't that a shade too vehement?
We're neither of us adolescents, Charles. We're neither of us led exactly prim lives, have we? We've both been married before. Careless rapture at the stage would be incongruous and embarrassing.
Hope I haven't been in any way a disappointment, dear.
Don't be so idiotic.
After all, your first husband was a great deal older than you, wasn't he? I shouldn't like you to think that you missed out all along the line.
There are moments, Charles, when you go too far.
Sorry, darling.
As far as waspish female psychology goes, there's a rather strong vein of it in you.
I've heard that said about Julius Caesar.
Julius Caesar is neither here nor there.
He may be, for all we know. We'll ask Madame Arcati.
You're awfully irritating when you're determined to be witty at all costs. Almost supercilious.
That's exactly what Elvira used to say.
I'm not at all surprised. I never imagined, physically triumphant as she was, that she was entirely lacking in perception.
Oh, darling Ruth.
There you go again.
As I think I mentioned before, I love you, my love.
Poor Elvira.
Didn't that light, comradely kiss mollify you at all?
Well, very annoying, you know you are. When I said poor Elvira, it came from the heart. You must have bewildered her so horribly.
Oh, don't I ever bewilder you at all?
Never for an instant. I know every trick.
Well, all I can say is that we'd better get a divorce immediately.
Put my glass down, there's a darling.
She certainly had a great talent for living. It was a pity she died so young.
Poor Elvira.
That remark is getting monotonous.
Poor Charles, then.
That's better.
And later on, poor Ruth, I expect.
Oh, you have no faith, Ruth. I really do think you should try to have a little faith.
I shall strain every nerve.
Life without faith is an arid business.
How beautifully you put things, dear.
I aim to please.
If I died, I wonder how long it would be before you married again.
Oh, you won't die. You're not the dying sort.
Neither was Elvira.
Oh, yes, she was. Now that I look back on it, she had a certain ethereal, not quite of this world quality. Nobody could call you even remotely ethereal.
Nonsense. She was of the earth. Earthly.
Well, she is now, anyhow.
You know, that's the kind of observation that shocks people.
It's discouraging to think how many people are shocked by honesty, and how few by deceit.
Write that down. You might forget it.
You underrate me.
Anyhow, it was a question of bad taste more than honesty.
I was devoted to Elvira. We were married for 5 years. She died. I missed her very much. That was 7 years ago. I have now, with your help, my love, risen above the whole thing.
Admirable. But if tragedy should darken our lives, I still say, with prophetic foreboding, poor Ruth.
A bell is heard.
That's probably the Bradmans.
It might be Madame McCarthy.
No, she'll come on her bicycle. She always goes everywhere on her bicycle.
It really is very spirited of the old girl.
Shall I go, or shall we let Edith have her fling?
Wait a minute and see what happens.
Perhaps she didn't hear.
She's probably on one knee in a pre-sprinting position, waiting for Cook to open the kitchen door.
There's the sound of a door banging, and Edith is seen scampering across the hall.
Steady, Edith!
Yes, sir.
After a moment, Dr. and Mrs. Bradman come into the room. Charles goes forward to meet them. Dr. Bradman is a pleasant-looking, middle-aged man. Mrs. Bradman is fair and rather faded. Mrs. Bradman comes to Ruth, who meets her above the sofa and shakes hands. Dr. Bradman shakes hands with Charles.
Doctor and Mrs. Bradman.
Oh, we're not late, are we? I only got back from the hospital about half an hour ago.
Oh, of course not. Madame Alcati isn't even here yet.
That must have been her we passed coming down the hill. I said I thought it was.
Then she won't be long. I'm so glad you were able to come.
Ruth comes down the sofa, sits on the poop. Mrs. Bradman sits on the end of the sofa.
We've been looking forward to it. I feel really quite excited.
Oh, I guarantee that Violet will be good. I made her promise.
There wasn't any need. I'm absolutely thrilled. I've only seen Madame Arcati 2 or 3 times in the village. I mean, I've never seen her do anything at all peculiar, if you know what I mean.
Dry martini?
Oh, by all means.
She certainly is a strange woman. It was only a chance remark at the vicar's about seeing her up on the knoll on Midsummer Eve dressed in sort of Indian robes that made me realize she was a psychic at all. Then I began making inquiries. Apparently, she's been a professional in London for years.
Isn't it? It is funny, isn't it? I mean, anybody doing it as a profession.
I believe it's very lucrative.
Do you believe in it, Mrs. Condamine? Do you think there's anything really genuine about it at all?
I'm afraid not, but I do think it's interesting how easily people allow themselves to be deceived.
But she must believe it herself, mustn't she? Or is the whole business a fake?
I suspect the worst. A real professional charlatan. That's what I'm hoping for anyhow. The character I'm planning for my book must be a complete imposter. That's one of the most important factors of the whole story.
Well, what exactly are you hoping to get from her?
Jargon, principally. A few of the tricks of the trade. I haven't been to a seance for years. I want to refresh my memory.
Oh, then it's not entirely new to you.
Oh, no. When I was a little boy, an aunt of mine used to come and stay with us. She imagined that she was a medium and used to go off into the most elaborate trances after dinner. My mother was fascinated by it.
Was she convinced?
Good heavens, no. She just naturally disliked my aunt and loved making a fool of her.
I gather there were never any tangible results.
Oh, sometimes she didn't do so badly. On one occasion when we were all sitting around in the pitch dark with my mother groping her way through Chaminade at the piano, my aunt suddenly gave a shrill scream and said that she saw a small black dog by my chair. Then someone switched on the lights and sure enough, there it was.
But how extraordinary.
Oh, it was obviously a stray that had come in from the street. But I must say I took off my hat to Auntie for producing it, or rather, for utilizing it. Even Mother was a bit shaken.
What happened to it?
It lived with us for years.
I sincerely hope Madame McCarthy won't produce any livestock. We have so very little room in this house.
Do you think she tells fortunes? I love having my fortune told.
Oh, I expect so.
I was told once on the pier at Southsea that I was surrounded by lilies and a golden seven. It worried me for days.
We really must all be serious, you know, and pretend that we believe implicitly. Otherwise, she won't play.
Also, she might really mind. It would be cruel to upset her.
I shall be good as gold.
Have you ever attended her, Doctor? Professionally, I mean.
Oh, yes, she had influenza in January. She's only been here just over a year, you know. I must say she was singularly unpsychic then. I always understood that she was an authoress.
Oh, yes. We originally met as colleagues at one of Mrs. Wilmot's Sunday evenings in Sandgate.
What sort of books does she write?
Two sorts. Rather whimsical children's stories about enchanted woods filled with highly conventional flora and fauna, and enthusiastic biographies of minor royalties. Very sentimental, reverent, and extremely funny.
Sounds of the front doorbell.
Here she is.
She knows, doesn't she, about tonight? You're not going to spring it on her.
Of course, it was all arranged last week. I told her how profoundly interested I was in anything to do with the occult, and she blossomed like a rose.
I really feel quite nervous, as though I were going to make a speech.
Edith is seen sedately going toward the door.
You go and meet her, darling.
Ruth crosses to the side of the door. Charles to the side of the door by the piano. Dr. Bradman moves above the sofa. Meanwhile, Edith has opened the door and Madame McCarty's voice, very high and clear, is heard.
I've leant my bike up against that little bush. It will be perfectly all right if no one touches it.
Madam Arcady.
How nice of you to have come all this way.
Madame McCarty enters. She's a striking woman dressed not too extravagantly, but with a decided bias toward the barbaric. She might be any age, 45 to 65. Ruth ushers her in. Ruth and Charles greet her simultaneously.
My dear Madame Arcady.
I'm afraid I'm rather late. but I had a sudden presentiment that I was going to have a puncture, so I went back to fetch my pump. And then, of course, I didn't have a puncture at all.
Perhaps you will on the way home.
Dr. Bradman, the man with the gentle hands.
I'm delighted to see you looking so well. This is my wife.
Oh, we are old friends. We meet coming out of shops.
Would you like a cocktail?
If it's a dry martini, yes. If it's a concoction, no. Experience has taught me to be very wary of concoctions.
It is a dry martini.
How delicious. It was wonderful cycling through the woods this evening. I was deafened with bird song.
It's been lovely all day.
But the evening's the time. Mark my words. Thank you. Cheers. Cheers.
Don't you find it very tiring bicycling everywhere?
On the contrary, it stimulates me. I was getting far too sedentary in London. That horrid little flat with dim lights. They had to be dim, you know. The clients expected.
I must say, I find bicycling very exhausting.
Steady rhythm, that's what counts. Once you get the knack of it, you need never look back. On you get and away you go.
But the hills, Madame Arcati, pushing up those awful hills.
Just knack again. Down with your head, up with your heart, and you're over the top like a flash and skimming down the other side like a dragonfly. This is the best dry martini I've had for years.
Will you have another?
Certainly. You're a very clever man. Anybody can write books, but it takes an artist to make a dry martini that's dry enough.
Are you writing anything nowadays, Madame Arcati?
Every morning, regular as clockwork, 7 till 1.
Is it a novel or a memoir?
It's a children's book. I have to finish it by the end of October to catch the Christmas sales. It's mostly about very small animals. The hero is a moss beetle. I have my memoir of Princess Pagliatani because she died in April. I talked to her about it the other day and she implored me to go on with it, but I really hadn't the heart.
You talked to her about it the other day?
Yes, through my control, of course. She sounded very irritable.
It's funny to think of people in the spirit world being irritable, isn't it? I mean, one can hardly imagine it, can one?
We have no reliable guarantee that the afterlife will be any less exasperating than this one, have we?
Oh, Mr. Condamine, how can you?
I expect it's dreadfully ignorant of me not to know, but who was Princess Pagliatani?
She was originally a Jewess from Odessa, quite remarkable beauty. It was an accepted fact that people used to stand on the seats of railway stations to watch her whiz by.
She was a keen traveler?
In her younger days, yes. Later on, she married a Mr. Clark in the consular service and settled down for a while.
How did she become Princess Pagliatani?
That was years later. Mr. Clark passed over and left her penniless with 2 strapping girls.
How unpleasant.
And so there was nothing for it but to obey the beckoning finger of adventure and take to the road again. So off she went, bag and baggage, to Vladivostok.
It's an extraordinary place to go.
She had cousins there. Some years later, she met old Pagliatani, who was returning from a secret mission in Japan. He was immediately staggered by her beauty and very shortly afterwards married her. From then on, her life became really interesting.
I should hardly have described it as dull before.
What happened to the girls?
She neither saw them nor spoke to them for 23 years.
How extraordinary.
Not at all. She was always very erratic emotionally.
Dinner is served, ma'am.
Thank you, Edith. Shall we?
No red meat, I hope.
There's meat, but I don't think it will be very red. Would you rather have an egg or something?
Oh, no, thank you. It's just that I make it a rule never to eat red meat before I work. It sometimes has an odd effect.
What sort of effect?
Oh, nothing of the least importance. If it isn't very red, it won't matter much. Anyhow, we'll risk it.
Come along then, Mrs. Bradman. Madam McCarthy, you're on Charles' right.
They all move into the dining room, lights fade. Scene 2. When the lights come up, dinner is over. Ruth, Mrs. Bradman, and Madame Arcady are sitting having their coffee. Mrs. Bradman on the pouf, Madame Arcady on the edge of the sofa. Ruth on the end of the sofa. All have coffee cups. The doors are open, the windows are closed, and the curtains are half closed.
On her mother's side, she went right back to the Borgias, which I think accounted for a lot one way or another. Even as a child, she was given to the most violent, destructive tempers, very inbred.
Yes, she must have been.
My control was quite scared the other day when we were talking. I could hear it in her voice. After all, she's only a child.
Do you always have a child as a control?
Yes, they're generally the best. Some mediums prefer Indians, of course, but personally, I've always found them unreliable.
In what way unreliable?
Well, for one thing, they're frightfully lazy. And also, when faced with any sort of difficulty, they're rather apt to go off in their own tribal language, which is naturally unintelligible. That generally spoils everything and wastes a great deal of time. No, children are undoubtedly more satisfactory, particularly when they get to know you and understand your ways. Daphne has worked with me for years.
And she still goes on being a child. I mean, she doesn't show signs of growing any older.
Time values on the other side are utterly different from ours.
Do you feel funny when you go off into a trance?
In what way funny?
Mrs. Bradman doesn't mean funny in its comic implication. I think she meant odd or strange.
The word was an unfortunate choice.
I'm sure I'm very sorry.
It doesn't matter in the least. Please, don't apologize.
When did you first discover that you had these extraordinary powers?
When I was quite tiny. My mother was a medium before me, you know, and so I had every opportunity of starting on the ground floor, as you might say. I had my first trance when I was 4 years old, and my first ectoplasmic manifestation when I was 5.5. What an exciting day that was. I shall never forget it. Of course, the manifestation itself was quite small and of very short duration, but for a child of my tender years, it was most gratifying.
Your mother must have been so pleased.
She was.
Can you foretell the future?
Certainly not. I disapprove of fortune tellers most strongly.
Oh, really? Why?
Too much guesswork and fake mixed up with it, even when the gift is genuine. And it only very occasionally is. You can't count on it.
Why not?
Time again. Time is the reef upon which all our frail mystic ships are wrecked.
You mean because it has never yet been proved that the past and the present and the future are not one and the same thing?
I long ago came to the conclusion that nothing has ever been definitely proved about anything.
How very wise.
Madame Arcady hands her cup to Ruth. Mrs. Bradman puts her cup behind her on the small table downstage. Edith comes in with a tray of drinks. She puts the tray down on the table by Ruth. Ruth moves the coffee cup and base to make room for it. She takes a cigarette box and ashtray from the table and gives them to Edith, who pulls them on the drinks table.
I want you to leave the dining room just as it is for tonight, Edith. You can clear the table in the morning.
Yes, sir.
And we don't want to be disturbed for the next hour or so for any reason whatsoever. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
And if anyone should telephone, just say we are out and take a message.
Unless it's an urgent call for George.
Unless it's an urgent call for Dr. Bradman.
Yes, sir.
There's not likely to be one, is there?
No, I don't think so.
Once I'm off, it won't matter, but an interruption during the preliminary stages might be disastrous.
I wish the men would hurry up. I'm terribly excited.
Please don't. It makes everything much, much more difficult.
Well, Madame Arcati, the time is drawing near.
Who knows? It may be receding.
How very true.
Oh, I hope you feel in the mood, Madame Arcati.
It isn't a question of mood, it's a question of concentration.
You must forgive us for being impatient. We can perfectly easily wait, though, if you're not quite ready to start.
Nonsense, my dear, I'm absolutely ready. Hi-ho, to work we go.
Is there anything you'd like us to do?
Do?
Yes, hold hands or anything?
All that will come later. First, a few deep, deep breaths of fresh air. You may talk if you wish. It will not disturb me in the least.
Oh dear.
An excellent dinner, darling. I congratulate you.
The mousse wasn't quite right.
Oh, it looked a bit hysterical, but it tasted delicious.
That cuckoo is very angry.
I beg your pardon?
I said that cuckoo is very angry. Listen.
How can you tell?
Timbre. No moon. That's as well, I think. There's mist rising from the marshes. There's no need for me to light my bicycle lamp, is there? I mean, nobody's likely to fall over it.
No, we're not expecting anybody else.
Good night, you foolish bird. You have a table.
Yes, we thought that one would do.
I think the one that has the drinks on it would be better.
The changeover.
You told Edith we didn't want to be disturbed.
Yes, darling.
This is a moment I always hate.
Are you nervous?
Yes. When I was a girl, I always used to be sick.
How fortunate that you grew out of it.
Children are always much more prone to be sick than grown-ups, though, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
I know I could never travel on a train with any degree of safety until I was 14.
Little Tommy Tucker sings for his supper. What shall he have but brown bread and butter? Oh, I despise that, but it doesn't rhyme at all. But Daphne loves it.
Who's Daphne?
Daphne is Madame...
Sorry.
Was that right? That was mine?
Yeah, it's you gone.
Daphne is Madame Arcati's control. She's a little girl.
Oh, I see. Yes, of course.
How old is she?
Rising 7 when she died.
And when was that?
February the 6th, 1884.
Poor little thing.
She must be a bit long in the tooth by now, I should think.
You should think, Dr. Bradman, but I fear you don't. At least, not profoundly enough.
Do be quiet, George. You'll put Madame Arcati off.
Well, don't worry, my dear. I'm quite used to skeptics. They generally turn out to be the most vulnerable and receptive in the long run.
You'd better take that warning to heart, Dr. Bradman.
Please forgive me, Madame Arcati. I can assure you I am most deeply interested.
It is of no consequence. Will you all sit around the table, please, and place your hands downwards on it?
Come, Mrs. Bradman.
What about the lights?
All in good time, Mr. Condamine. Sit down, please.
The four of them sit down at each side of the seance table. Ruth is facing Mrs. Bradman, Charles on Ruth's right, Dr. Bradman on Ruth's left. Madame Arcati comes to about the table between Ruth and Dr. Bradman and surveys them critically, her head on one side. She is whistling a little tune. Then she sings.
The fingers should be touching. That's right. I presume that is the gramophone, Mr. Condamine.
Yes, would you like me to start it? It's an electric one.
Oh, please stay where you are. I can manage. Now, let me see. What have we here? Brahms? Oh, dear, no. Rachmaninoff, too florid. Where is the dance music?
They're the loose ones on the left.
I see.
I'm afraid they're none of them very new.
Daphne is really more attached to Irving Berlin than anybody else. She likes a tune she can hum. Ah, here's one. Always.
Always?
Do sit down, Charles. What is the matter?
Nothing. Nothing at all.
The light switch is by the door.
Yes, all except the small one on the desk and the gramophone.
Very well, I understand.
Charles, do keep still.
Fingers touching, George. Remember what Madame Arcati said?
Now, there are one or two things that I should like to explain, so will you all listen attentively?
Of course.
Presently, when the music begins, I'm going to switch out the lights. I may then either walk about the room for a little or lie down flat. In due course, I shall draw up this dear little stool and join you at the table. I shall place myself between you and your wife, Mr. Condamine, and rest my hands lightly upon yours. I must ask you not to address me or move or do anything in the least distracting. Is that quite clear?
Perfectly.
Of course, I cannot guarantee that anything will happen at all. Daphne may be unavailable. She had a head cold very recently and was rather under the weather, poor child. On the other hand, a great many things might occur. One of you might have an emanation, for instance, or we might contact a poltergeist, which would be extremely destructive and noisy.
In what way destructive?
They throw things, you know.
No, I didn't know.
But we must cross that bridge when we come to it, mustn't we?
Certainly, by all means.
Fortunately, an elemental at this time of the year is most unlikely.
What do elementals do?
Oh, my dear, one can never tell. They're dreadfully unpredictable. Usually they take the form of a very cold wind.
I don't think I like the sound of that.
Occasionally reaching almost hurricane velocity.
You don't think it would be a good idea to take the more breakable ornaments off the mantelpiece before we start?
That really is not necessary, Mrs. Condamine. I assure you, I have my own methods of dealing with elementals.
I'm so glad.
Now then, are you ready to empty your mind?
You mean we're to try to think of nothing?
Absolutely nothing, Dr. Bradman. Concentrate on a space or a nondescript color. That's really the best way.
Well, I'll do my damnedest.
Good work. I will now start the music.
She puts on the record of Always and begins to walk about the room. Occasionally, she moves into an abortive little dance step. Then, with sudden speed, she runs across the room and switches off the lights.
Lights!
Oh, dear.
Quiet, please.
In the gloom, Madame Arcati, after wandering about a little, brings the stool from the piano to between Ruth and Charles and sits at the table. The gramophone record comes to an end. There is dead silence.
Is there anyone there? Is there anyone there? One rap for yes, two raps for no. And now then, is there anyone there?
The table gives a little bump.
Oh!
Shh. Is that you, Daphne?
The table gives a louder bump.
Is your cold better, dear?
2 loud bumps very quickly.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Are you doing anything for it?
The table bumps several times.
I'm afraid she's rather fretful. Is there anyone there who wishes to speak to anyone here?
1 bump.
Ah, now we're getting somewhere. No, Daphne, don't do that, dear. You're hurting me. Daphne, dear, please. Oh, be good. There's a dear child. You say there's someone there who wishes to speak to someone here?
1 bump.
Is it me?
2 bumps.
Is it Dr. Bradman?
2 bumps.
Is it Mrs. Bradman?
2 bumps.
Is it Mrs. Condamine?
Several very loud bumps, which continue until Madame Arcadi shouts it down.
Stop it, behave yourself. Oh. Is it Mr. Condamine?
One very loud single bump.
There's someone who wishes to speak to you, Mr. Condamine.
Tell them to leave a message.
The table bangs about loudly.
I really must ask you not to be flippant, Mr. Condamine.
Charles, how can you be so idiotic? You'll spoil everything.
I'm sorry, it slipped out.
Do you know anybody who's passed over recently?
Not recently, except my cousin in the civil service, and he wouldn't be likely to want to communicate with me. We haven't spoken for years.
Are you Mr. Condamine's cousin in the civil service?
The table bumps violently several times.
I'm afraid we've drawn a blank. Can't you think of anyone else? Rack your brains.
It might be old Mrs. Plummet, you know. She died on Whit Monday.
I can't imagine why old Mrs. Plummet would wish to talk to me. We have very little in common.
It's worth trying, anyhow.
Are you old Mrs. Plummet?
She was very deaf. Perhaps you'd better shout?
Are you old Mrs. Plummet? There's nobody there at all.
How disappointing. Just as we were getting on so nicely.
Violet, be quiet.
Well, I'm afraid there's nothing for it but for me to go into a trance. I had hoped to avoid it because it's so exhausting. However, what must be, must be. Excuse me a moment while I start the gramophone again.
Not always. Don't play always.
Why not, Charles? Don't be absurd.
I'm afraid I must. It would be imprudent to change horses in midstream, if you know what I mean.
Have it your own way.
Madame Arcadi starts to moan and comes back slowly to the stool and sits. Then in the darkness, a child's voice is heard, reciting rather breathlessly, Little Tommy Tucker.
Yeah, that would be Jack.
Sings for it.
Have had her adenoids out.
George, please.
Madame Arcadi suddenly gives a loud scream, falls off the stool onto the floor.
Oh, God!
Keep still, Charles.
Everyone sits in silence for a moment, then the table starts bouncing about.
It's trying to get away. I can't hold it.
Press down hard.
The table falls over with a crash.
There now.
Ought we to pick it up or leave it where it is?
How the hell do I know?
Well, there's no need to snap at me.
Leave it where it is.
Who said that?
Who said what?
Somebody said leave it where it is.
Nonsense, dear.
I heard it distinctly.
Well, nobody else did they?
I never heard a sound.
Oh, it's with you, Ruth. You're playing tricks.
I'm not doing anything of the sort. I haven't uttered.
Good evening, Charles.
Ventriloquism. That's what it is. Ventriloquism.
What is the matter with you?
Well, you must have heard that. One of you must have heard that.
Heard what?
You mean to sit there solemnly and tell me that none of you heard anything at all?
Well, I certainly didn't.
Neither did I. I wish I had. I should love to hear something.
It's you who are playing the tricks, Charles. You're acting to try to frighten us.
I'm not. I swear, I'm not.
It's difficult to think of what to say after 7 years, but I suppose good evening is as good as anything else.
Who are you?
Elvira, of course. Don't be silly.
Can't bear this for another minute. Get up, everybody. The entertainment's over.
He rushes across the room and switches out the lights. Then he moves to the fireplace. All others rise. Madame Arcadi is on the floor, her head towards the audience and her feet on the stool.
Oh, Charles, how tiresome of you. Just as we were beginning to enjoy ourselves.
Never again. That's all I can say. Never, never again, as long as I live.
What on earth's the matter with you?
Nothing's the matter with me. I'm just sick of the whole business. That's all.
Did you hear anything that we didn't hear, really?
Of course not. I was only pretending.
I know you were.
Oh dear, look at Madame Arcati.
What are we to do with her?
Bring her around as soon as possible.
No, I think we'd better leave her alone.
But she might stay like that for hours.
She's out all right.
Bring her round. It's dangerous to leave her there like that.
Really, Charles, you are behaving most peculiar.
Wake up, Madame Arcati, wake up! It's time to go home.
Here, go easy, old man.
Get some brandy. Give her some brandy. Lift her into the chair. Help me, Bradman. Wake up, Madame Arcati. Little Tommy Tucker, Madame Arcati.
Here's the brandy.
Wake up.
Oh, she's coming round.
Be careful, Charles. You're spilling it all down her dress.
Well, that's that.
Are you all right?
Certainly I am. Never felt better in my life.
Would you like some more brandy?
So that's the funny taste in my mouth. Well, really. Fancy allowing them to give me brandy, Dr. Bradman. You ought to have known better. Brandy on top of a trance might have been catastrophic. Take it away, please. I probably shan't sleep a wink tonight as it is.
I know I shan't.
Why on earth not?
The whole experience has unhinged me.
Well, what happened? Was it satisfactory?
Nothing much happened, Madame Arcati, after you went off.
Well, something happened, all right. I can feel it. No poltergeist, at any rate. That's a good thing. Any apparitions?
Not a thing.
No ectoplasm?
I'm not quite sure what it is, but I don't think so.
Very curious. I feel as though something tremendous had taken place.
Charles pretended he heard a voice in order to frighten us.
It was only a joke.
A very poor one, if I may say so. Nevertheless, I am prepared to swear that there is someone else psychic in this room apart from myself.
I don't see how there can be, really, Madame Arcati.
I do hope I haven't gone and released something. However, we are bound to find out within a day or two. If any manifestations should occur or you hear any unexpected noises, you might let me know at once.
Of course we will. We'll telephone immediately.
I think I really must be on my way now.
Wouldn't you like anything before you go?
No, thank you. I have some Ovaltine already in the saucepan at home. It only needs hotting up.
Wouldn't you like to leave your bicycle here and let us drive you?
I honestly do think you should, Madame Arcati. Out of that trance and everything, you can't be feeling quite yourself.
Nonsense, my dear. I'm as fit as a fiddle. Always feel capital after a trance. Rejuvenates me. Good night, Mrs. Condamine.
It was awfully sweet of you to take so much trouble.
I'm so sorry so little occurred. It's that cold of Daphne's, I expect. You know what children are when they have anything wrong with them. You must try again some other evening.
That would be lovely.
Good night, Mrs. Bradman.
It was thrilling, it really was. I felt the table absolutely shaking under my hands.
Good night, Doctor.
Congratulations, Madame Arcati.
I am fully aware of the irony in your voice, Dr. Bradman. As a matter of fact, you'd be an admirable subject for telepathic hypnosis. A great chum of mine is an expert. I should like her to look you over.
I'm sure I should be charmed.
Good night, everyone. Next time, we must really put our backs into it.
With a comprehensive smile and wave of the hand, she goes out, followed by Charles. Ruth sinks down into the sofa, laughing helplessly. Mrs. Bradman comes and sits in the armchair. Dr. Bradman picks up the seance table and puts the desk chair back upstage, then comes back and puts the poof back in position. He then returns.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
Be careful, Mrs. Condamine. She might hear you.
I can't help it. I'm really can't. I've been holding this in for ages.
He certainly put you in your place, George. And serve you right.
She's raving mad, of course. Mad as a hatter.
But do you really think she believes?
Of course not. The whole thing's a put-up job. I must say, though, she shoots a more original line than they generally do.
I should think that she's probably half convinced herself by now.
Possibly. The trance was genuine enough, but that, of course, is easily accounted for.
Hysteria?
Yes, a form of hysteria, I should imagine.
I do hope Mr. Condamine got all the atmosphere he wanted for his book.
He might have got a great deal more if he hadn't spoiled everything by showing off. I'm really very cross with him.
At this moment, Elvira comes in through the French windows. She is charmingly dressed in a sort of negligee. Everything about her is gray: hair, skin, dress, hands. So we must accept the fact that she is not quite of this world. She passes between the doctor and Mrs. Bradman and Ruth while they are talking. None of them see her. She moves to the fireplace, then comes round the sofa to below the piano, where she leans. She regards them with interest, a slight smile on her face.
Whew, I suddenly felt a draft. There must be a window open.
Oh, no, they're shut.
Perhaps it was one of those, what you may call them, Madame Arcati was talking about.
Elementals.
Oh, no, it couldn't be. She distinctly said that it was the wrong time of year for elementals.
Well, the old girl's gone pedaling off down the drive at the hell of a speed. We had a bit of trouble lighting her lamp.
Poor thing.
I've got a theory about her, you know. I believe she is completely sincere.
Charles, how could she be?
Wouldn't it be possible, Doctor? Some form of self-hypnotism?
It might be. As I was explaining to your wife just now, there are certain types of hysterical subjects.
George, dear, it's getting terribly late. We really must go home. You have to get up early in the morning.
You see, the moment I begin to talk about anything that really interests me, my wife interrupts me.
You know I'm right, darling. It's past 11.
I'll do a little reading up on the whole business, just for the fun of it.
You must have a drink before you go.
No, really, thank you. Violet's quite right. I'm afraid. I have to get up abominably early tomorrow. I have a patient being operated on in Canterbury.
It's been a thrilling evening. I shall never forget it. It was sweet of you to include us.
Good night, Mrs. Cardamine. Thank you so much.
You're sure about the drink?
Quite sure, thanks.
We'll let you know if we find any poltergeists swirling about.
I should never forgive you if you didn't.
Come along, darling.
Well, darling?
Well?
Would you say the evening had been profitable?
Yes, I suppose so.
I must say it was extremely funny at moments.
Yes, it certainly was.
What's the matter?
The matter?
Yes, you seem old somehow. Do you feel quite well?
Perfectly. I think I'll have a drink. Do you want one?
No, thank you, dear.
It's rather chilly in this room.
Come over by the fire.
I don't think I'll make any notes tonight. I'll start fresh in the morning.
Charles turns, the glass in his hand. He sees Elvira and drops the glass on the floor.
My God!
Charles!
That was very clumsy, Charles, dear.
Elvira, then it's true. It was you.
Of course it was.
Charles? Darling, Charles, what are you talking about?
Are you a ghost?
I suppose I must be. It's all very confusing.
Charles, what do you keep looking over there for? Look at me. What's happened?
Don't you see?
See what?
Elvira!
Elvira?
Yes, Elvira, dear. This is Ruth. Ruth, this is Elvira.
Come and sit down, darling.
Do you mean to say you can't see her?
Listen, Charles, you just sit down quietly by the fire and I'll mix you another drink. Don't worry about the mess on the carpet. Edith can clean it up in the morning.
But you must be able to see her. She's there. Look, right in front of you. There.
Are you mad? What's happened to you?
You can't see her.
If this is a joke, dear, it's gone quite far enough. Sit down, for God's sake, and don't be idiotic.
Oh, what am I to do? What the hell am I to do?
I think you might be a little pleased to see me. After all, you conjured me up.
I didn't do any such thing.
Nonsense, of course you did. That awful child with the cold came and told me you wanted to see me urgently.
It was all a mistake, a horrible mistake.
Stop talking like that, Charles. As I told you before, the joke's gone far enough.
I've gone mad. That's what it is. I've just gone raving mad.
Here, drink this.
This is appalling.
Relax.
How can I relax? I shall never be able to relax again as long as I live.
Drink some brandy.
There. Now are you satisfied?
Now sit down.
Why are you so anxious for me to sit down? What good will that do?
I want you to relax. You can't relax standing up.
African natives can. They can stand on one leg for hours.
I don't happen to be an African native.
You don't happen to be a what?
An African native.
What's that got to do with it?
It doesn't matter, Ruth. It really doesn't matter. We'll say no more about it now. See, I've sat down.
Would you like some more brandy?
Yes, please.
Very unwise. You always had a weak head.
I could drink you under the table.
There's no need to be aggressive, Charles. I'm doing my best to help you.
I'm sorry.
Here, drink this, and then we'll go to bed.
Get rid of her, Charles. Then we can talk in peace.
That's a thoroughly immoral suggestion. You ought to be ashamed of yourself.
What is there immoral in that?
I wasn't talking to you.
Who were you talking to then?
Elvira, of course.
To hell with Elvira.
There now, she's getting cross.
I don't blame her.
What don't you blame her for?
Oh, God.
Now, look here, Charles. I gather you've got some sort of plan behind all of this. I'm not quite a fool. I suspected you when we were doing that idiotic seance.
Don't be silly. What plan could I have?
I don't know. It's probably something to do with the characters in your book. How they or one of them would react to a certain situation. I refuse to be used as a guinea pig unless I'm warned beforehand what it's all about.
Elvira is here, Ruth. She's standing only a few yards away from you.
Yes, dear, I can see her distinctly, under the piano with a zebra.
But Ruth...
I'm not going to stay here arguing any longer.
Hooray!
Shut up!
How dare you speak to me like that?
Well, listen, Ruth, please, listen.
I will not listen to any more of this nonsense. I am going up to bed now. I'll leave you to turn out the lights. I shan't be asleep. I'm too upset. So you can come in and say goodnight to me if you feel like it.
That's big of her, I must say.
Oh, be quiet. You're behaving like a gutter snipe.
That is all I have to say. Good night, Charles.
Ruth!
That was one of the most enjoyable half hours I've ever spent.
Oh, Elvira, how could you?
Poor Ruth.
This is obviously a hallucination, isn't it?
I'm afraid I don't know the technical term for it.
Oh, what am I to do?
What Ruth suggested. Relax.
Where have you come from?
Do you know, it's very peculiar, but I've sort of forgotten.
Are you to be here indefinitely?
I don't know that either.
Oh, my God.
Why? Would you hate it so much if I was?
Well, you must admit it would be embarrassing.
I don't see why, really. It's all a question of adjusting yourself. Anyhow, I think it's horrid of you to be so unwelcoming and disagreeable.
Now, look here, Elvira.
I do. I think you're mean.
Try to see my point, dear. I've been married to Ruth for 5 years, and you've been dead for 7.
Not dead, Charles. Passed over. It's considered vulgar to be dead where I come from.
Passed over, then.
At any rate, now that I'm here, the least you can do is to make a pretense of being amiable about it.
Oh, of course, my dear. I'm delighted in one way.
I don't believe you love me anymore.
I shall always love the memory of you.
You mustn't think me unreasonable, but I really am a little hurt. You called me back, and at great inconvenience I came, and you've been thoroughly churlish ever since I arrived.
Believe me, Elvira, I most emphatically did not send for you. There's been some mistake.
Well, somebody did, and that child said it was you. I remember I was playing backgammon with a very sweet Oriental gentleman. I think his name was Genghis Khan, and I'd just thrown double sixes. And then the child paged me, and the next thing I know, I was in this room. Perhaps it was your subconscious.
You must find out whether you're going to stay or not, and we can make arrangements accordingly.
I don't see how I can.
Well, try to think. Is there anyone you know that you can get in touch with over there on the other side or whatever it's called who could advise you?
I can't think. It seems so far away as though I dreamed it.
You must know somebody besides Genghis Khan.
Oh, Charles.
What is it?
I want to cry, but I don't think I'm able to.
What do you want to cry for?
It's seeing you again. And being so irascible like you always used to be.
I don't mean to be irascible, Elvira.
Darling, I don't mind it, really. I never did.
Is it cold, being a ghost?
No, I don't think so.
What happens if I touch you?
I doubt if you can. Do you want to?
Oh, Elvira.
What is it, darling?
I really do feel strange seeing you again.
That's better.
What's better?
Your voice was kinder.
Was I ever unkind to you when I was alive?
Often.
Oh, how can you? I'm sure that's an exaggeration.
Oh, you were an absolute pig the time we went to Cornwall and stayed at that awful hotel. You hit me with a billiard cue.
Only very, very gently.
I loved you very much.
I loved you too. No, I can't touch you. Isn't that horrible?
Perhaps it's as well as if I'm going to stay here for any length of time.
I suppose I shall wake up eventually, but I feel strangely peaceful now.
That's right. Put your head back.
Like that.
Can you feel anything?
Only a very little breeze through my hair.
Well, it's better than nothing.
I suppose if I'm really out of my mind, they'll put me in an asylum.
Don't worry about that. Just relax.
Oh, poor Ruth.
To hell with Ruth.
Black out. Act 2, Scene 1. It's about 9:30 the next morning. The sun is pouring in through the open French windows. The curtains are wide open. The doors are shut. A breakfast table is set below the piano. Ruth sits at the table, her back to the window, reading the Times. Charles comes in and kisses her.
Good morning, darling.
Good morning, Charles.
It certainly is.
What certainly is what?
A good morning. A tremendously good morning. There isn't a cloud in the sky, and everything looks newly washed.
Edith's keeping your breakfast hot. You'd better ring.
Anything interesting in the Times?
Oh, don't be silly, Charles.
I intend to work all day.
Good.
Extraordinary about daylight, isn't it?
How do you mean?
The way it reduces everything to normal.
Does it?
Yes, it does.
I'm sure I'm very glad to hear it.
You're very glacial this morning.
Are you surprised?
Frankly, yes. I expected more of you.
Well, really?
I've always looked upon you as a woman of perception and understanding.
Perhaps this is one of my off days.
Good morning, Edith.
Good morning, sir.
Feeling fit?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
How's Cook?
I don't know, sir. I haven't asked her.
Oh, you should. You should begin every day by asking everyone how they are. It oils the wheels.
Yes, sir.
Greet her from me, will you?
Yes, sir.
That will be all for the moment, Edith.
Yes, sir.
I wish you wouldn't be facetious with the servants, Charles. It confuses them and undermines the morale.
I consider that point of view retrogressive, if not downright feudal.
I don't care what you consider it. I have to run the household, and you don't.
Are you implying that I couldn't?
Oh, you're at liberty to try.
Oh, I take back what I said about it being a good morning. It's a horrid morning.
You'd better eat your breakfast while it's hot.
It isn't.
Now look here, Charles. In your younger days, this display of roguish flippancy might have been alluring. In a middle-aged novelist, it's nauseating.
Would you rather like me to writhe at your feet in a frenzy of self-abasement?
That would be equally nauseating, but certainly more appropriate.
I really don't see what I've done that's so awful.
You behaved abominably last night. You wounded me and insulted me.
I was the victim of an aberration.
Oh, nonsense, you were drunk.
Drunk?
You had 4 strong dry martinis before dinner, a great deal too much burgundy at dinner. Heaven knows how much port and common with Dr. Bradman while I was doing my best to entertain that madwoman. And then 2 double brandies later, I gave them to you myself. Of course you were drunk.
So that's your story, is it?
You refused to come to bed. And finally, when I came down at 3 in the morning to see what had happened to you, I found you in an alcoholic coma on the sofa with the fire out and your hair all over your face.
I was not in the least drunk, Ruth. Something happened to me last night. Something very peculiar happened to me.
Nonsense.
It isn't nonsense. I know it looks like nonsense now in the clear, remorseless light of day, but last night it was far from being nonsense. I honestly had some sort of hallucination.
I would really rather not discuss it any further.
But you must discuss it. It's very disturbing.
There I agree with you. It showed you up in a most unpleasant light. I find that extremely disturbing.
I swear to you that during the seance I was convinced that I heard Elvira's voice.
Nobody else did.
I can't help that. I did.
Oh, you couldn't have.
And later on, I was equally convinced that she was in this room. I saw her distinctly and talked to her. After you'd gotten up to bed and we had quite a cozy little chat.
And you seriously expect me to believe that you weren't drunk?
I know I wasn't drunk. If I'd been all that drunk, I should have a dreadful hangover now, shouldn't I?
I'm not at all sure that you haven't.
I haven't got a trace of a headache. My tongue's not coated. Look at it.
I've not the least desire to look at your tongue. Kindly put it in again.
I know what it is. You're frightened.
Frightened? Rubbish. What is there to be frightened of?
Elvira, you wouldn't have minded all that much, even if I had been drunk. It's only because it was all mixed up with Elvira.
I seem to remember last night before dinner telling you that your views of female psychology were rather didactic. I was right. I should have added that they were puerile.
That was when it all began.
When what all began?
We were talking too much about Elvira. It's dangerous to have somebody very strongly in your mind when you start dabbling with the occult.
She certainly wasn't strongly in my mind.
No, she was in mine.
Oh, she was she?
You tried to make me say that she was more physically attractive than you so that you could hold it over me.
I did not. I don't give a hoot how physically attractive she was.
Oh, yes, you do. Your whole being is devoured with jealousy.
This is too much.
Women! My God, what I think of women.
Your view of women is academic, to say the least of it. Just because you've always been dominated by them, it doesn't necessarily follow that you know anything about them.
I've never been dominated by anyone.
You were hag-ridden by your mother until you were 23. Then you got into the clutches of that awful Mrs. whatever her name was.
Mrs. Winthrop Llewellyn?
I'm not interested. Then there was Elvira. She ruled you with a rod of iron.
Elvira never ruled anyone. She was much too elusive. That was one of her greatest charms.
Then there was Maud Charteris.
My affair with Maud Charteris lasted exactly 7.5 weeks, and she cried all the time.
The tyranny of tears. Then there was...
If you wish to make an inventory of my sex life, dear, I think it only fair to tell you that you missed out several episodes. I'll consult my diary and give you the complete list after lunch.
It's no use trying to impress me with your routine amorous exploits.
The only woman in my whole life who's ever attempted to dominate me is you. You've been at it for years.
That is completely untrue.
Oh, no, it isn't. You boss me and bully me and order me about. You don't even allow me to have an hallucination if I want to.
Charles, alcohol will ruin your whole life if you allow it to get a hold of you, you know.
Once and for all, Ruth, I would like you to understand that what happened last night was nothing whatsoever to do with alcohol. You very adroitly rationalized the whole affair to your own satisfaction, but your deduction is based on a complete fallacy. I'm willing to grant you that it was an aberration, some sort of odd psychic delusion brought on by suggestion or hypnosis. I was stone cold sober from first to last and extremely upset in the bargain.
You were upset indeed. What about me?
You behaved with a stolid, obtuse lack of comprehension that frankly shocked me.
I consider that I was remarkably patient. I shall know better next time.
Instead of putting out a gentle, comradely hand to guide me, you shouted staccato orders at me like a sergeant major.
You seem to forget that you gratuitously insulted me.
I did not.
You called me a gutter snipe. You told me to shut up. And when I quietly suggested that we should go up to bed, you said, with the most disgusting leer, that it was an immoral suggestion.
I was talking to Elvira.
If you were, I can only say that it conjures up a fragrant picture of your first marriage.
My first marriage was perfectly charming, and I think it's in the worst possible taste for you to sneer at it.
I'm not nearly so interested in your first marriage as you think I am. It's your second marriage that is absorbing me at the moment. It seems to be on the rocks.
Only because you persist in taking up this ridiculous attitude.
My attitude is that of any normal woman whose husband gets drunk and hurls abuse at her.
I was not drunk.
Oh, be quiet. They'll hear you in the kitchen.
I don't care if they hear me in the Folkestone Town Hall. I was not drunk.
Control yourself, Charles.
How can I control myself in the face of your idiotic damn stubbornness? It's giving me claustrophobia.
You'd better ring up Dr. Bradman.
Can I clear, please, Mum?
Yes, Edith.
Cook wants to know about lunch, Mum.
Will you be in to lunch, Charles?
Oh, please don't worry about me. I shall be perfectly happy with a bottle of gin in my bedroom.
Don't be silly, dear. Tell Cook we shall both be in.
Yes,
I'm going into Heist this morning. Is there anything you want?
Yes, a great deal, but I doubt if you could get it in height.
Tell Cook to put Alka-Seltzer down on my list, will you, Edith?
yes.
It's clouding over.
You have a genius for understatement.
Don't worry about the table, Edith. I'll put it away.
Yes,
Please, Ruth, be reasonable.
I'm perfectly reasonable.
I wasn't pretending. I really did believe I saw Elvira, and when I heard her voice, I was appalled.
You put up with it for 5 years.
When I saw her, I had the shock of my life. That's why I dropped the glass.
But you couldn't have seen her.
I know I couldn't have, but I did.
I'm willing to concede then that you imagined you did.
That's what I've been trying to explain to you for hours.
Well then, there's obviously something wrong with you.
Exactly. There is something wrong with me. Something fundamentally wrong with me. That's why I've been imploring your sympathy, and all I've got was a sterile temperance lecture.
You had been drinking, Charles. There's no denying that.
No more than usual.
Well, how do you account for it then?
I can't account for it. That's what's so awful.
Did you feel quite well yesterday? During the day, I mean.
Of course I did.
What did you have for lunch?
You ought to know. You had it with me.
Let me see now. There was a lemon sole and that cheese thing.
And why should having a cheese thing for lunch make me see my deceased wife after dinner?
You never know. It was rather rich.
Well, why didn't you see your dead husband then? You had as much of it as I did.
This is not getting us anywhere at all.
Of course it isn't, and it won't as long as you insist on ascribing supernatural phenomena to colonic irritation.
Supernatural grandmother.
I admit she'd have been much less agitating.
Perhaps you ought to see a nerve specialist.
I am not in the least neurotic and never have been.
A psychoanalyst, then?
I refuse to endure months of expensive humiliation only to be told at the end of it that at the age of 4 I was in love with my rocking horse.
What do you suggest, then?
Ooh, I don't suggest anything. I'm profoundly uneasy.
Perhaps there's something pressing on your brain.
If there was something pressing on my brain, I should have violent headaches, shouldn't I?
Oh, not necessarily. An uncle of mine had a lump the size of a cricket ball pressing on his brain for years, and he never felt a thing.
I know I should know if I had anything like that.
He didn't.
And what happened to him?
He had it taken out, and he's been bright as a button ever since.
Did he have any sort of delusions? Did he think he saw things that weren't there?
No, I don't think so.
Well, then what the hell are we talking about him for, then? It's a sheer waste of valuable time.
I only brought him up as an example.
Oh, I think I'm going mad.
How do you feel now?
Physically, do you mean?
Altogether.
Oh, apart from being worried, I feel quite normal.
Good. You're not hearing or seeing anything in the least unusual?
Not a thing.
Elvira enters by the windows, carrying a bunch of gray roses. She crosses to the writing table upstage and throws the zinnias into the waste paper basket and puts her roses into the vase. The roses are as gray as the rest of her.
You've absolutely ruined that border by the sundial. It looks like a mixed salad.
Oh, my God.
What's the matter now?
She's here again.
What do you mean? Who's here again?
Elvira.
Oh, pull yourself together and don't be absurd.
It's all those nasturtiums. They're so vulgar.
I like nasturtiums.
You like what?
They're all right in moderation, but in a mass like that, they look beastly.
Help me, Ruth. You've got to help me.
What did you mean about nasturtiums?
Never mind about that now. I tell you, she's here again.
You have been having a nice scene, haven't you? I could hear you right down to the garden.
Please mind your own business.
If you behaving like a lunatic isn't my business, nothing is.
I expect it was about me, wasn't it? I know I ought to feel sorry, but I'm not. I'm delighted.
How can you be so inconsiderate?
Inconsiderate? I like that, I must say.
Ruth, darling, please.
I've done everything I can to be helpful. I've controlled myself admirably. And I should like to say here and now that I don't believe a word about your damned hallucination. You're up to something, Charles. There's been a certain furtiveness in your manner for weeks. Why don't you be honest and tell me what it is?
You're wrong. You're dead wrong. I haven't been the least furtive. I've just...
You're trying to upset me. For some obscure reason, you're trying to goad me into doing something that I might regret. I won't stand for it anymore. You're making me utterly miserable.
Ruth, please.
Don't come near me.
Let her have a nice cry. It'll do her good.
You're utterly heartless.
Heartless?
I was not talking to you. I was talking to Elvira.
Oh, go on talking to her then. Talk to her until you're blue in the face, but don't talk to me.
Help me, Elvira.
How?
Make her see you or something.
Oh, I'm afraid I can't manage that. It's technically the most difficult business, frightfully complicated, you know. It takes years of study and you have to...
You are here, aren't you? You're not an illusion.
I may be an illusion, but I'm most definitely here.
How did you get here?
I told you last night, I don't know exactly how.
Well, you must make me a promise that in the future you'll only come and talk to me when I'm alone.
How unkind you are, making me feel so unwanted. I've never been treated so rudely.
Oh, I don't mean to be rude, but you must see that it's
all your own fault for having married a woman who was incapable of seeing beyond the nose on her face. If she had a grain of real sympathy or affection for you, she'd believe what you tell her.
How could you expect anybody to believe this?
You'd be surprised how gullible people are. We often laugh about it on the other side.
Charles?
Yes, dear.
I'm awfully sorry I was cross.
But, my dear...
I understand everything now. I do, really.
Oh, you do?
Of course I do.
Look out, she's up to something.
Will you please be quiet?
Of course, darling. We'll all be quiet, won't we? We'll be as quiet as little mice.
Ruth, dear, listen.
I want you to come upstairs with me and go to bed.
The way that woman hops on a bed is nothing short of erotic.
I'll deal with you later.
Very well, darling. Come along.
What are you up to?
I'm not up to anything. I just want you to go quietly to the bed and wait there until Dr. Bradman comes.
No, Ruth, you're wrong.
Come, dear.
She'll have you in a straitjacket before you know where you are.
Help me. You must help me.
My dear, I would with pleasure, but I can't think how.
I can. Listen, Ruth.
Yes, dear.
If I promise to go to bed, you will let me stay here for 5 minutes longer?
I really think it would be better.
Bear with me, however mad it may seem. Bear with me for just 5 minutes longer.
Very well. What is it?
Sit down.
All right. There.
Now, listen. Listen carefully.
Have a cigarette. It will soothe your nerves.
I don't want a cigarette.
Then you shan't have one, darling.
Oh, Ruth, I want to explain to you clearly and without emotion that beyond any shadow of doubt, the ghost or shade or whatever you like to call it of my first wife, Elvira, is in this room now.
Oh, yes, dear.
I know you don't believe it and are trying valiantly to humor me, but I intend to prove it to you.
Why not lie down and have a nice rest, and you can prove anything you want to later on.
She may not be here later on.
Don't worry, she will.
Oh, God.
Oh, hush, dear.
Promise you'll do what I ask.
That depends on what it is.
Ruth, you see that bowl of flowers on the piano?
Yes, dear, I did it myself this morning.
Very untidily, if I may say so.
You may not.
Very well, I never will again, I promise.
Elvira will now carry that bowl of flowers to the mantelpiece and back again. You will, Elvira, won't you? Just to please me.
I don't really see why I should. You've been quite insufferable to me ever since I materialized.
Please.
All right. I will just this once. Not that I approve of all these masculine and avant carryings on.
Now, Ruth, watch carefully.
Very well, dear.
Go on, Elvira. Take it to the mantelpiece and back again.
Elvira takes the bowl of pansies off the piano and brings it slowly downstage, below the armchair to the fire, then suddenly pushes it towards Ruth's face, who jumps up and faces Charles, who is at the mantelpiece.
How dare you, Charles? You ought to be ashamed of yourself.
What on earth for?
It's a trick. I know perfectly well it's a trick. You've been working up to this. It's all part of some horrible plan.
It isn't. I swear it isn't. Elvira, do something else. For God's sake.
Certainly, anything to oblige.
You want to get rid of me. You're trying to drive me out of my mind.
Don't be so silly.
You're cruel and sadistic, and I'll never forgive you.
Elvira picks up the chair from downstage, holds it in midair as if to hit Ruth. Ruth flinches. Then Elvira puts it back and stands above the windows. Ruth makes a dive for the door, moving between the armchair and sofa. Charles follows and catches her.
I'm not going to put up with this anymore.
You must believe it. You must.
Let me go immediately.
That was Elvira. I swear it was.
Let me go.
Ruth, please.
Ruth breaks away to the windows. Elvira shuts them in her face and crosses quickly to the mantelpiece. Ruth turns at the windows for Charles, to face Charles.
Charles, this is madness, sheer madness. It's some sort of auto-suggestion, isn't it? Some sort of hypnotism. Swear to me it's only that. Swear to me it's only that.
Hypnotism, my foot.
Ruth gives a scream and goes into violent hysterics. The curtain falls. Scene 2. The time is late on the following afternoon. The doors are shut. The windows are shut. The curtains are open. When the curtains rise, Ruth is sitting alone at the tea table, which is set in front of the fire. After a moment or two, she gets up and, frowning thoughtfully, goes to the mantelpiece and takes a cigarette out of a box and lights it. She returns to the table. The front doorbell rings. She hears it and straightens herself as though preparing for a difficult interview. Edith enters.
Madam Arcady.
My dear Mrs. Condamine, I came directly. I got your message.
That was very kind of you.
Kind? Nonsense. Nothing kind about it. I look upon it as an outing.
I'm so glad. Will you have some tea?
China or Indian?
China.
Good. I never touch Indian. It upsets my vibrations.
Oh, do sit down.
I find this room very interesting. Very interesting indeed. I noticed it the other night.
I'm not entirely surprised.
Have you ever been to Cowden Manor?
No, I'm afraid I haven't.
That's very interesting too. Strikes you like a blow between the eyes the moment you walk into the drawing room. 2 lumps of sugar, please, and no milk at all.
I am profoundly disturbed, Madame Arcati, and I want your help.
Aha, I thought as much. What's in these sandwiches?
Cucumber.
Couldn't be better. Fire away.
It's most awfully difficult to explain.
Facts first, explanations afterwards.
It's the facts that are difficult to explain. They're so fantastic.
Facts very often are. Take creative talent, for instance. How do you account for that? Look at Shakespeare and Michelangelo. Try to explain Mozart snatching sounds out of the air and putting them down on paper when he was practically a baby. Facts, plain facts. I know it's the fashion nowadays to ascribe it all to glands, but my reply to that is fiddle-dee-dee.
Yes, I'm sure you're quite right.
There are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy, Mrs. Condon.
There certainly are.
Come now, take the plunge. Out with it. You've heard strange noises in the night, no doubt? Boards creaking, doors slamming, subdued moaning in the passages. Is that it?
No, I'm afraid it isn't.
No sudden gusts of cold wind, I hope?
No, it's worse than that.
I'm all attention.
I know it sounds idiotic, but the other night, during the seance, something happened.
I knew it! Probably a poltergeist. They're enormously cunning, you know. They sometimes lie doggo for days.
You know that my husband was married before.
Yes, I have heard it mentioned.
His first wife, Elvira, died comparatively young.
Where?
Here, in this house, in this very room.
Whew, I'm beginning to see daylight.
She was convalescing after pneumonia, and one evening she started to laugh helplessly at one of the BBC musical programs and died of a heart attack.
And she materialized the other evening, after I had gone?
Not to me, but to my husband.
Ah, capital, capital. But that's splendid.
From your own professional standpoint, I can see that it might be regarded as a major achievement.
A triumph, my dear. Nothing more nor less than a triumph.
But from my own personal point of view, it is, to say the very least of it, embarrassing.
At last, a genuine manifest materialization.
Please sit down again, Madam McCarthy.
How could anyone sit down at a moment like this? It's tremendous. I haven't had such a success since the Sudbury case.
Nevertheless, I must insist upon you sitting down and controlling your natural exuberance. I appreciate fully your pride in your achievements, but I would like to point out that it has made my position in this house untenable and that I hold you entirely responsible.
Forgive me, Mrs. Condamine. I am being abominably selfish. How can I help you?
How? By sending her back immediately to where she came from, of course.
I'm afraid that is easier said than done.
Do you mean to tell me that she is liable to stay here indefinitely?
It's difficult to say. I fear it depends largely on her.
But my dear Madam McCarthy.
Where is she now?
My husband has driven her into Folkestone. Apparently she was anxious to see an old friend of hers who is staying at the Grand.
Oh, forgive me this formality, but I shall have to make a report to the psychical research people.
I would be very much obliged if there were no names mentioned.
Oh, the report will be confidential.
This is a small village, you know, and gossip would be most undesirable.
I quite understand. You say she is visible only to your husband?
Yes.
Visible only to husband. Audible too, I presume?
Extremely audible.
Extremely audible. Your husband was devoted to her?
I believe so.
Husband devoted.
It was apparently a reasonably happy marriage.
No, tut-tut.
I beg your pardon?
When did she pass over?
7 years ago.
Aha! That means she must have been on the waiting list.
Waiting list?
Yes, otherwise she would have got beyond the materialization stage by now. She must have marked herself down for a return visit and she'd never have been able to manage it unless there was a strong influence at work.
Do you mean that Charles, my husband, wanted her back all that much?
Possibly, or it might have been her own determination.
That sounds much more likely.
Would you say that she was a woman of strong character?
I really don't know, Madame McCarthy. I never met her, nor am I particularly interested in how and why she got here. I am solely concerned with the question of how to get her away again as soon as possible.
I fully sympathize with you, Mrs. Condamine, and I assure you I will do anything in my power to help. But at the moment I fear I cannot offer any great hopes.
But I always understood that there was a way of exorcising ghosts, some sort of ritual?
You mean the old bell and book method?
Yes, I suppose I do.
Poppycock, Mrs. Condamine. It was quite effective in the old days of genuine religious belief. But that's all changed now. I believe the decline of faith in the spirit world has been causing grave concern.
Has it indeed?
There was a time, of course, when a drop of holy water could send even a poltergeist scampering for cover, but not anymore. Où sont les neiges d'attente?
Be that as it may, Madame McCarthy, I must beg of you to do your utmost to dematerialize my husband's first wife as soon as possible.
The time has come for me to admit to you frankly, Mrs. Condamine, that I haven't the faintest idea how to set about it.
Do you mean to sit there and tell me that having mischievously conjured up this ghost or spirit or whatever she is and placed me in a hideous position, you are unable to do anything about it at all?
Honesty is the best policy.
But it's outrageous. I ought to hand you over to the police.
You go too far, Mrs. Condamine.
I go too far indeed. Do you realize what your insane amateur meddling has done?
I have been a professional since I was a child, Mrs. Condamine. Amateur is a word I cannot tolerate.
It seems to me to be the height of amateurishness to evoke malignant spirits and not be able to get rid of them again.
I was in a trance. Anything might happen when I am in a trance.
Well, all I can suggest is that you go into another one immediately and get this damned woman out of my house.
I can't go into trances at a moment's notice. It takes hours of preparation. In addition to which, I have to be extremely careful of my diet for days beforehand. Today, for instance, I happened to lunch with friends and had pigeon pie, which, plus these cucumber sandwiches, would make a trance out of the question.
Well, you have to do something.
I will report the whole matter to the Society for Psychical Research at the earliest possible moment.
Will they be able to do anything?
I doubt it. They'd send an investigation committee, I expect, and do a lot of questioning and wall tapping and mumbo jumbo. And then they'd have a conference, and you would probably have to go up to London to testify.
It's too humiliating, really, it is.
Please, try not to upset yourself. Nothing can be achieved by upsetting yourself.
It's all very fine for you to talk like this, Madame McCarthy. You don't seem to have the faintest realization of my position.
Try to look on the bright side.
Bright side indeed. If your husband's first wife suddenly appeared from the grave and came to live in the house with you, do you suppose you'd be able to look on the bright side?
I resent your tone, Mrs. Condamine. I really do.
Oh, you most decidedly have no right to. You are entirely to blame for the whole horrible situation.
Kindly remember that I came here the other night on your own invitation.
On my husband's invitation.
I did what I was requested to do, which was to give a seance and establish contact with the other side. I had no idea that there was any ulterior motive mixed up with it.
Ulterior motive?
Your husband was obviously eager to get in touch with his former wife. If I had been aware of that at the time, I should naturally have consulted you beforehand. After all, noblesse oblige.
He had no intention of trying to get in touch with anyone. The whole thing was planned in order for him to get material for a mystery story he's writing about a homicidal medium.
Am I to understand That I was only invited in a spirit of mockery?
Not at all. He merely wanted to make notes of some of the tricks of the trade.
Tricks of the trade? Insufferable! I've never been so insulted in my life. I feel we have nothing more to say to one another, Mrs. Condamine. Goodbye.
Oh, please don't go, please.
Your attitude from the outset has been most unpleasant, Mrs. Condamine. Some of your remarks have been discourteous in the extreme, and I should like to say, without umbrage, that if you and your husband were foolish enough to tamper with the unseen for paltry motives and in a spirit of ribaldry, whatever has happened to you is your own fault, and, to coin a phrase, as far as I'm concerned, you can stew in your own juice.
Damn, 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 damn.
After a moment or two, Charles comes in with Elvira. Charles moves to above the sofa. Elvira turns to the piano and tidies her hair in the mirror.
What on earth was Madame Arcati doing here?
She came to tea.
Did you ask her?
Of course I did.
You never told me you were going to.
You never told me you were going to ask Elvira to live with us.
I didn't.
Oh, yes, you did, darling. It was your subconscious.
What was the old girl so cross about? She practically cut me dead.
I told her the truth about why we invited her the other night.
That was quite unnecessary and most unkind.
She needed taking down a bit. She was blowing herself up like a pouter pigeon.
Why did you ask her to tea?
To get me exercised, of course. Oh dear, I wish I could have had a cucumber sandwich. I do love them so.
Is that true, Ruth?
Is what true?
What Elvira said.
You know perfectly well I can't hear what Elvira says.
She said that you got Madame Arcati here to try and get her exercised. Is that true?
We discussed the possibilities.
There's a snake in the grass for you.
You had no right to do such a thing without consulting me.
I have every right. This situation is absolutely impossible, and you know it.
Oh, if only you'd make an effort and try to be a little bit more friendly to Elvira, we might have quite a jolly time.
I have no wish to have a jolly time with Elvira.
She's certainly very bad-tempered, isn't she? I can't think why you married her.
Well, she's naturally a bit upset. We must make allowances.
I was never bad-tempered, though. Was I, darling? Not even when you were beastly to me.
I was never beastly to you.
Where is Elvira at the moment?
In the chair by the table.
Now look here, Elvira. I shall have to call you Elvira, shan't I? I can't very well go on saying Mrs. Condamine all the time. It wouldn't sound too silly.
I don't see why.
Did she say anything?
She said she'd like nothing better.
You really are sweet, Charles, darling. I worship you.
I wish to be absolutely honest with you, Elvira.
Hold on to your hat, boys.
I admit I did ask Madame Arcati here with a view to getting you exercised, and I think that if you were in my position, you'd have done exactly the same thing, wouldn't you?
I shouldn't have done it so obviously.
What did she say?
Nothing. She just nodded and smiled.
Thank you, Elvira. That's generous of you. I really would so much rather that there were no misunderstandings between us.
Oh, that's very sensible, Ruth. I agree entirely.
I want, before we go any further, to ask you a frank question. Why did you really come here? I don't see that you could have hoped to have achieved anything by it beyond the immediate joke of making Charles into some sort of astral bigamist.
I came because of the power of Charles's love tugged and tugged and tugged at me. Didn't it, my sweet?
What did she say?
She said that she came because she wanted to see me again.
Well, she's done that now, hasn't she?
We can't be inhospitable, Ruth.
I have no wish to be inhospitable, but I should like to have just an idea of how long you intend to stay, Elvira.
I don't know. I really don't know. Isn't it awful?
She says she doesn't know.
Surely that's a little inconsiderate.
Didn't the old spiritualist have any constructive ideas about getting rid of me?
What did Madame Arcati say?
She said she couldn't do a thing.
Hooray!
Don't be upset, Ruth, dear. We shall soon adjust ourselves, you know. You must admit it's a unique experience. I can see no valid reason why we shouldn't get a great deal of fun out of it.
Fun? Charles, how can you... You must be out of your mind.
Not at all. I thought I was at first, but now I must say I'm beginning to enjoy myself.
Oh, Charles! Charles!
He's off again.
You really must not be so callous, Elvira. Try to see her point a little.
I suppose she said something insulting.
No, dear, she didn't do anything of the sort.
Now look here, Elvira.
She's over by the window now.
Why the hell can't you stay in the same place?
Timber again. My poor Charles, what a terrible life you must lead.
Do shut up, darling. You'll only make everything worse.
Who was that darling addressed to? Her or me?
Both of you.
This is intolerable.
Oh, for heaven's sake, don't get into another state.
I've been doing my level best to control myself ever since yesterday morning, and I'm damned if I'm going to try any more. The strain is too much. She has the advantage of being able to say whatever she pleases without me being able to hear her, but she can hear me all right, can't she, without any modified interpreting?
Modified interpreting? I don't know what you mean.
Oh, yes, you do. You haven't told me once what she really said. You wouldn't dare. Judging from her photographs, she's the type who would use the most unpleasant language.
Ruth, you're not to talk like that.
I've been making polite conversation all through dinner last night, and breakfast, and lunch today, and it's been a nightmare. I'm not going to do it anymore. I don't like Elvira any more than she likes me, and what's more, I'm certain that I never could have, dead or alive. If, since the untimely arrival here the other evening, she had shown the slightest sign of good manners, the slightest sign of breeding, I might have felt differently towards her, but all she has done is try to make mischief between us and have private jokes with you against me. I am now going up to my room, and I shall have my dinner on a tray. You and she can have the house to yourselves and joke and gossip with each other to your heart's content. The first thing in the morning, I am going up to London to interview the Physical Research Society, and if they fail me, I shall go straight to the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Ruth.
Let her go. She'll calm down later on.
It's unlike her to behave like this. She's generally so equable.
No, she isn't. Not really. Her mouth gives her away. It's a hard mouth, Charles.
Her mouth has nothing to do with it. I resent you discussing Ruth as though she were a horse.
Do you love her?
Of course I do.
As much as you loved me?
Oh, don't be silly. It's entirely different.
I'm so glad. Nothing could ever have been quite the same, could it?
You always behave very badly.
Oh, Charles.
I'm grieved to see that your sojourn in the other world hasn't improved you in the least.
Go on, darling. I love it when you pretend to be cross with me.
I'm now going up to talk to Ruth.
Cowardly custard.
Don't be idiotic. I can't let her go like that. I must be a little nice and sympathetic to her.
I don't see why. If she's set on being disagreeable, I should just let her get on with it.
The whole business is very difficult for her. We must be fair.
You should learn to be more adaptable.
Probably will in time. It's been a shock.
Has it been a shock for you too, darling?
Of course. What do you expect?
A nice shock?
What do you want, Elvira?
What? I don't know what you mean.
I remember that whenever you were overpoweringly demure, it usually meant you wanted something.
Horrid of you to be so suspicious. All I want is to be with you.
Well, you are.
I mean alone, darling. If you go and pamper Ruth and swarm her over, she'll probably go flouncing down again, and our lovely quiet evening together will be spoiled.
You're incurably selfish.
Well, I haven't seen you for 7 years. Only natural that I would want to spend a little alone time with you, to talk over old times. I'll let you go up for just a little while if you really think it's your duty.
Of course it is.
Then I don't mind.
Oh, you're disgraceful, Elvira.
You won't be long, will you? You'll come down again very soon.
I shall probably dress for dinner while I'm upstairs. You can read the Times or something.
Darling, you don't have to dress for me.
I always dress for dinner.
What are you going to have? I should like to watch you eat something really delicious.
Be a good girl now. You can play the gramophone if you like.
Thank you, Charles.
Charles goes out. Elvira gets up, looks into the gramophone cupboard, finds the record of Always and puts it on. She starts to waltz lightly around the room to it. Edith comes in to fetch the tea tray. She sees the gramophone playing by itself, so she turns it off and puts the record back in the cupboard. While she is picking up the tray, Elvira takes the record out and puts it on again. Edith gives a shriek, drops the tray, and rushes out of the room. Elvira continues to waltz gaily. Curtain. Take 5.
Thank you, Brad.
Oh, should we not? No. This is not an act break. It's a scene break.
Right.
Sorry, continuing. Scene 3. The time is evening several days later. The doors are shut. The windows are also shut. The curtains are open. When the curtain rises, Mrs. Bradman is sitting in the armchair. Ruth is standing by the window, drumming on the pane with her fingers.
Does it show any signs of clearing?
No, it's still pouring.
I do sympathize with you, really I do. It's really been quite a chapter of accidents, hasn't it?
It certainly has.
That happens sometimes, you know. Everything seems to go wrong all at once, exactly as though there were some evil forces at work. I remember once when George and I went away for a fortnight's holiday, not long after we were married. We were dogged by bad luck from beginning to end. The weather was vile. Charles sprained his ankle. I caught a cold and had to stay in bed for 2 days. And to crown everything, the lamp fell over in the sitting room and set fire to the treatise George had written on hyperplasia of the abdominal glands.
How dreadful.
He had to write it all over again, every single word.
You're sure you wouldn't like a cocktail or some sherry or anything?
No, thank you, really not. George will be down in a minute, and we've got to go like lightning. We were supposed to be at the Wilmots at 7, and it's nearly that now.
I think I'll have a little sherry. I feel I need it.
Don't worry about your husband's arm, Mrs. Condamine. I'm sure it's only a sprain.
It's not his arm I'm worried about.
And I'm sure Edith will be up and about again in a few days.
My cook gave notice this morning.
Well, really? Servants are awful, aren't they? Not a shred of gratitude. At the first sign of trouble, they run out on you like rats leaving a sinking ship.
I can't feel that your simile was entirely fortunate, Mrs. Bradman.
Oh, I didn't mean that. Really, I didn't.
Oh, nothing to worry about, Mrs. Condamine. It's only a slight strain.
I'm so relieved.
He made a good deal of fuss when I examined it. Men are much worse patients than women, you know. Particularly highly strung men like your husband.
Is he highly strung, do you think?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I wanted to talk to you about that. I'm afraid he's been overworking lately.
Overworking?
He's in rather a nervous condition. Nothing serious, you understand.
What makes you think so?
I know the symptoms. Of course, the shock of his fall might have something to do with it, but I certainly should advise a complete rest for a couple of weeks.
You mean he ought to go away?
I do. In cases like that, a change of atmosphere can work wonders.
What symptoms did you notice?
Nothing to be unduly alarmed about. A certain air of strain, an inability to focus his eyes on the person he is talking to, a few rather marked irrelevancies in his conversation.
I see. Can you remember any specific example?
He suddenly shouted, "What are you doing in the bathroom?" And then a little later, while I was writing him a prescription, he suddenly said, "For God's sake, behave yourself."
How extraordinary.
He often goes on like that, particularly when he's immersed in writing his book.
Oh, I am not in the least perturbed about it, really, but I do think a rest and a change would be a good idea.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Would you like some sherry?
No, thank you. We really must be off.
How is poor Edith?
Oh, she'll be all right in a few days. She's still recovering from the concussion.
It's funny, isn't it, that both your housemaid and your husband should fall down on the same day, isn't it?
Yes, that sort of thing amuses you.
Oh, oh, I didn't mean it like that, Mrs. Condamine.
Oh, come along, my dear. You're talking too much as usual.
You are horrid, George. Goodbye, Mrs. Condamine.
Goodbye.
I'll pop in and have a look at both patients sometime tomorrow morning.
Thank you so much.
Charles comes in and above the table. His left arm is in a sling. Elvira follows him in and crosses above the sofa to the fire and then crosses to the front. Ruth is at the mantelpiece.
Well, how does it feel?
All right.
It's only a slight sprain, you know.
Is this damn sling really essential?
It's a wise precaution. It will prevent you using your left hand except when it's really necessary.
I had intended to drive into Folkestone this evening.
It would be much better if you didn't.
It's extremely inconvenient.
You can easily wait and go tomorrow, Charles.
I can't stand another one of those dreary evenings at home. Charles, it'll drive me dotty, and I haven't seen a movie for 7 years.
Let me be the first to congratulate you.
What's that, old man?
Charles, dear, try to be sensible, I implore you.
Sorry, I forgot.
You can drive the car if you promise to go very slowly and carefully. Your gear change is on the right, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, use your left hand as little as possible.
All right.
You'd much better stay at home.
Couldn't you drive him in?
I'm afraid not. I have lots to do in the house, and there's Edith to be tended to.
Well, I'll leave you to fight it out among yourselves. But remember, if you do insist on going, carefully does it. The roads are very slippery anyhow. Come along, Violet.
Goodbye again. Goodbye, Mr. Condamine.
Goodbye.
You really are infuriating, Elvira. Surely you could wait and go to the movies another night.
Elvira takes a rose out of the vase on the table and throws it at Ruth. She then runs out of the windows.
And stop behaving like a schoolgirl. You're old enough to know better.
What?
I was talking to Elvira.
She isn't here.
She was a moment ago. She threw a rose at me.
She's been very high-spirited all day. I know this mood of old. It usually meant that she was up to something.
You're sure she isn't here?
Quite sure.
I want to talk to you.
Oh, God.
I must. It's important.
You've behaved very well for the last few days, Ruth. You're not going to start making scenes again, are you?
I resent that air of patronage, Charles. I have behaved well, as you call it, because there was nothing else to do, but I think it only fair to warn you that I offer no guarantee for the future. My patience is being stretched to its uttermost.
As far as I can see, the position is just as difficult for Elvira as it is for you, if not more so. The poor little thing comes back trustingly after all those years in the other world, and what is she faced with? Nothing but brawling and hostility.
What did she expect?
Surely even an ectoplasmic manifestation has its right to expect a little of the milk of human kindness.
Oh, milk of human fiddlesticks.
That just doesn't make sense, dear.
Elvira is about as trusting as a puff adder.
Oh, you're granite, Ruth. Sheer, unyielding granite.
And a good deal more dangerous into the bargain.
Dangerous? I've never heard anything so ridiculous. How could a poor, lonely, wistful little spirit like Elvira be dangerous?
Quite easily, and she is. She's beginning to show her hand.
How do you mean? In what way?
This is a fight, Charles. A bloody battle. A duel to the death between Elvira and me. Don't you realize that?
Melodramatic hysteria.
It isn't melodramatic hysteria. It's true. Can't you see?
No, I can't. You're imagining things. Jealousy causes people to have the most curious delusions.
I am making every effort not to lose my temper with you, Charles, but I must say you are making it increasingly difficult for me.
Well, all this talk of battles and duels.
She came here with one purpose and one purpose only. And if you can't see it, you're a bigger fool than I thought you.
Oh, what purpose could she have had beyond the natural desire to see me again? After all, you must remember that she was extremely attached to me, poor girl. Poor child.
Her purpose is perfectly obvious. It is to get you to herself forever.
That's absurd. How could she?
By killing you off, of course.
Killing me off? You're mad.
Why do you suppose Edith fell down the stairs and nearly cracked her skull?
What's Edith got to do with it?
Because the whole of the top stair was covered with axle grease. Cook discovered it afterwards.
You're making this up, Ruth.
I'm not. I swear I'm not. Why do you suppose, when you were lopping that dead branch off the pear tree, that the ladder broke? Because it had been practically sawn through on both sides.
But why should she want to kill me? I could understand her wanting to kill you, but why me?
If you were dead, it would be her final triumph over me. She'd have you with her forever on her damned astral plane, and I'd be left high and dry. She's probably planning a sort of spiritual remarriage. I wouldn't put anything past her.
Ruth!
Don't you see now?
She couldn't be so sly, so wicked. She couldn't.
Couldn't she just?
I grant you that as a character she was always rather light and irresponsible, but I would never have believed her capable of low cunning.
Perhaps the spirit world has deteriorated her.
Oh, Ruth.
For heaven's sake, stop looking like a wounded spaniel and concentrate. This is serious.
What are we to do?
You're not to let her know that we suspect a thing. Behave perfectly ordinarily, as though nothing had happened. I'm going to Madame Arcati immediately. I don't care how cross she is, she's got to help us. Even if she can't get rid of Elvira, she must know some technical method of rendering her harmless. If a trance is necessary, she shall go into a trance if I have to beat her into it. I'll be back in half hour. Tell Elvira I've got to see the vicar.
Oh, this is appalling.
Never mind about that. Remember now, don't give yourself away by so much as a flick of an eyelid.
Look out! Sorry.
Elvira comes in from the garden. She comes to above the armchair.
Look out!
What?
I merely said it's a nice lookout.
What's a nice lookout?
The weather, Elvira. The glass is going down and down and down. It's positively macabre.
I find it difficult to believe that you and Ruth at this particular moment, can't think of anything more interesting to talk about than the weather.
I can't stand this anymore. I really can't.
Ruth, dear, please.
Has she broken out again?
What did she say?
She asked if you have broken out again.
How dare you talk like that, Elvira?
Now then, Ruth.
Charles and I were not talking about the weather, Elvira, as you so very shrewdly suspected. I should loathe you to think that we had any secrets from you. And so I will explain exactly what we were talking about. I was trying to persuade him not to drive you into Folkestone this evening. It would be bad for his arm, and you can perfectly easily wait until tomorrow. However, as he seems to be determined to place your wishes before mine in everything, I have nothing further to say. I sure hope you both enjoy yourselves.
There now.
Oh, Charles, have you been beastly to her?
No, Ruth doesn't like being thwarted any more than you do.
She's a woman of sterling character. It's a pity she's so ungiving.
As I told you before, I would rather not discuss Ruth with you. It makes me uncomfortable.
I won't mention her again. Are you ready?
What for?
To go to Folkestone, of course.
I want a glass of sherry first.
I don't believe you want to take me out at all.
Of course I want to take you, but I still think it would be more sensible to wait until tomorrow. It's a filthy night.
How familiar this is.
In what way familiar?
All through our married life, I only had to suggest something for you to immediately start hedging me off.
I'm not hedging you off. I merely said that...
All right. We'll spend another cozy, intimate evening at home with Ruth, sewing away at that hideous table center and snapping at us like a terrier.
Ruth is perfectly aware that the table center is hideous. It happens to be a birthday present from her mother.
It's no use trying to defend Ruth's taste to me. It's thoroughly artsy-crafty, and you know it.
It is not artsy-craftsy.
She's ruined this room. Look at those curtains and that awful shawl on the piano.
Lady McKinley sent it to us from Burma.
Obviously, because it had been sent to her from Birmingham.
If you don't behave yourself, I shan't take you into Folkestone ever.
Please, Charles, don't be elderly and grand with me. Please, let's go now.
Not until I've had my sherry.
You are tiresome, darling. I've been waiting for hours.
A few more minutes won't make any difference then.
Oh, very well.
Besides, the car won't be back for half an hour at least.
What do you mean?
Ruth's taken it. She had to go and see the vicar.
What?
What on earth's the matter?
You said Ruth's taken the car?
Yes, to go and see the vicar, but she won't be long.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh,
Elvira!
Stop her. You must stop her at once.
What? What for?
Stop her. Go out and stop her immediately.
It's too late now. I heard her go a couple of minutes ago.
Oh, Charles. Oh!
What are you going on like this for? What have you done?
Don, I haven't done anything.
Elvira, you're lying.
I'm not lying. What is there to lie about?
What are you in such a state for?
I'm not in a state. I don't know what you mean.
You've done something dreadful.
Don't look at me like that, Charles. I haven't, I swear I haven't.
My God.
The car.
The car. Ruth was right. You did want to kill me. You've done something to the car. Answer me.
The telephone rings. Charles goes to the telephone and picks it up.
Hello? Hello. Yes, speaking. I see. The bridge at the bottom of the hill? Thank you. No, I'll come at once.
Well, of all the filthy, low-down tricks. Oh, stop it, Ruth! Leave! Go!
Elvira runs above the sofa to the door, out the room, slamming the door. It opens again immediately and slams again. Charles, standing still by the telephone, stares aghast. Curtain. Act 3, Scene 1. The time is evening a few days later. The doors are shut. The curtains are drawn. The windows behind the curtains are open. Charles is standing before the fire, drinking his after-dinner coffee. On both arms, he wears a band of deep mourning. He finishes his coffee. He puts the cup down on the mantelpiece, lights a cigarette, and settles himself comfortably on the settee. He adjusts a reading lamp and, with a sigh of well-being, opens a novel and begins to read. There is a ring at the front doorbell. With an exclamation of annoyance, he puts down the book, gets up, and goes into the hall. After a moment or so, Madame Arcady comes in. Charles follows her and shuts the door. Madame Arcady is wearing the strange, rather barbaric evening clothes that she wore in Act 1.
I hope you will not consider this an intrusion, Mr. Condamine.
Not at all. Please sit down, won't you?
Thank you.
Would you like some coffee or liqueur?
No, thank you. I had to come, Mr. Condamine.
Yes.
I felt a tremendous urge, like a rushing wind, and so I hopped on my bike, and here I am.
It was very kind of you.
No, not kind at all. It was my duty. I knew it strongly.
Duty?
I reproach myself bitterly, you know.
Please don't. There is no necessity for that.
I allowed myself to get into a huff the other day with your late wife. I rode all the way home in the grip of temper, Mr. Condamine. I have regretted it ever since.
My dear Madame Arcady.
Please, let me go on. Mine is the shame, mine is the blame. I shall never forgive myself. Had I been so impetuous, had I not been so impetuous, and I listened to the cool voice of reason, so much might have been averted.
You told my wife distinctly that you were unable to help her. You were perfectly honest. Over and above the original unfortunate mistake, I see no reason for you to reproach yourself.
I threw up the sponge. In a moment of crisis, I threw up the sponge instead of throwing down the gauntlet.
Whatever you threw, Madame Arcady, I very much fear nothing could have been done. It seems that circumstances have made a little too strong for all of us.
I cannot bring myself to admit defeat so easily. It is gall and wormwood to me. I could at least have concentrated, made an effort.
Never mind.
I do mind. I cannot help it. I mind with every fiber of my being. I have been thinking very carefully. I have also been reading up a good deal during the last few dreadful days. I gather that we are alone.
My first wife is not in the room. She's lying down. The funeral exhausted her. I imagine that my second wife is with her, but of course, I have no way of knowing for certain.
You have remarked no difference in the texture of your first wife since the accident?
Oh, no, she seems much as usual, a little under the weather perhaps, a trifle low-spirited, but that's all.
Well, that washes that out.
I'm afraid I don't understand.
Oh, just a little theory I had. In the 19th century, there was a pretty widespread belief that a ghost who had participated in the death of a human being disintegrated automatically.
How do you know that Elvira was in any way responsible for Ruth's death?
Elvira, such a pretty name. It has a definite lilt to it, hasn't it? Elvira, Elvira.
You haven't answered my question. How did you know?
It came to me last night, Mr. Condamine. It came to me in a blinding flash. I had just finished my Ovaltine and turned the light out when I suddenly started up in bed with a loud cry. Great Scott, I said, I've got it. After that, I began to put two and two together. At 3 a.m, with my brain fairly seething, I went to work on my crystal for a little, but it wasn't very satisfactory. Cloudy, you know.
I would be very much obliged if you would keep any theories you have regarding my wife's death to yourself, Madame Arcady.
My one desire is to help you. I feel I have been dreadfully remiss over the whole affair. Not only remiss, but untidy.
I am afraid there is nothing whatever to be done.
But there is. I have found a formula. Here it is. I copied it out of Edmondson's Witchcraft and its Byways.
What the hell are you talking about?
Pluck up your heart, Mr. Condamine. All is not lost.
Now look here, Madame Arcati.
You are still anxious to dematerialize your first wife, I suppose?
Of course I am. I'm perfectly furious with her, but...
But what?
Well, she's been very upset the past few days. You see, apart from me being angry with her, which she's always hated even when she was alive, Ruth, my second wife, has hardly left her side a moment. You must see that she's been having a pretty bad time, what with one thing or another.
Your delicacy of feeling does you credit. But I must say, if you'll forgive my bluntness, that you're a damned fool, Mr. Condamine.
You are at liberty to think whatever you please.
Now, don't get on your high horse. There's no sense in that, is there? I have a formula here that I think will be able to get rid of her without hurting her feelings in the least. It's extremely simple and requires nothing more than complete concentration from you and a minor trance from me. I may even be able to manage it without lying down.
Oh, honestly, I would rather...
At this moment, the door opens and Elvira comes quickly into the room. She is obviously very upset.
Charles!
What on earth's the matter?
Oh, what's she doing here?
She came to offer me her condolences.
They should have been congratulations.
Please, don't say things like that, Elvira. In the worst possible taste, Madame Amicati, allow me to introduce my first wife, Elvira.
What does she want, Charles? Send her on her way.
In what part of the room is she at the moment?
She's moving about rather rapidly. I'll tell you when and where she settles.
She's the one who got me here in... Sorry.
That's Elvira.
Who got me here in the first place, isn't she?
Yes.
Well, please tell her to get me away again as soon as possible. I can't stand this house another minute.
Really, Elvira? I'm surprised at you.
I don't care how surprised you are. I want to go home. I'm sick of the whole thing.
Don't be childish, Elvira.
I'm not being childish. I mean it.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I smell ectoplasm strongly.
What a disgusting thing to say.
Where is she now?
Here, close to me.
Are you happy, my dear?
Tell the silly old bitch to mind her own business.
Was the journey difficult? Are you weary?
She's dirty.
Just a moment. Madame Arcati.
Well, this is wonderful. Wonderful.
For God's sakes, tell her to go into another room, Charles. I've got to talk to you.
Madame Arcati.
Just a moment. I almost have contact. I can sense the vibrations. Oh, this is magnificent.
Go on, Elvira. Don't be a spoil sport. Give her a bit of encouragement.
If you'll promise to get her into another room.
All right.
Elvira crosses below Madame Arcati and blows in her ear.
Yes, yes. Oh, again. Oh.
How's that?
Oh, this is first rate. It really is first rate. Oh, absolutely stunning.
I'm so glad you're pleased.
Please get rid of her. Ruth will be in a minute.
Madame Arcati, would you think it most frightfully rude if I asked you to go into the dining room for a moment? My first wife wishes to speak to me, alone.
Oh, must I? It's so lovely being actually in the room with her.
Only for a few minutes. I promise she'll be here when you come back.
Very well. Hand me my bag, will you? It's on the settee.
Here you are.
Oh, you darling. You little darling.
How good is she really?
I don't know.
Do you think she could really get me back again?
My dear child.
And don't call me your dear child. It's smug and supercilious.
There's no need to be rude.
The whole thing's been a failure, a miserable, dreary failure. And oh, what high hopes I had starting out with.
You can't expect much sympathy from me, you know. I'm perfectly aware that your highest hope was to murder me.
Don't put it like that. It sounds so beastly.
It is beastly. It's one of the beastliest ideas I've ever heard.
There was a time when you would have welcomed the chance of being with me forever and ever.
Your behavior has shocked me immeasurably, Elvira. I had no idea you were so unscrupulous.
Oh, Charles!
Stop crying.
There are only ghosts here. They don't mean anything, really, but they're very painful.
You brought all this on yourself, you know.
That's right. Rub it in. Anyhow, it was only because I loved you. The silliest thing I've ever did in my whole life was to love you. You were always unworthy of me.
That remark comes perilously near impertinence, Elvira.
I sat there on the other side, just longing for you day after day. I really did. All through your affair with the brassy-looking women in south of France, I went on loving you and thinking truly of you. Then you married Ruth, and even then I forgave you, and I tried to understand because all the time I believed deep inside that you really loved me best. That's why I put myself down for a return visit and had to fill out all those forms and wait in that draughty passages for hours. If only you died before you met Ruth, everything would have been all right. She's absolutely ruined you. I hadn't been in the house a day before I realized that your books aren't a quarter as good as they used to be either.
That is entirely untrue. Ruth helped me and encouraged me with my work, which is a damn sight more than you ever did.
That's probably what's wrong with it.
All you ever thought of was going to parties and enjoying yourself.
Why shouldn't I have fun? I died young, didn't I?
You needn't have died at all if you hadn't been idiotic enough to go on the river with Guy Henderson and get soaked to the skin.
So we're back at Guy Henderson again, are we?
You behaved abominably over Guy Henderson, and it's no use pretending that you didn't.
Guy adored me. And anyhow, he was very attractive.
You told me distinctly that he didn't attract you in the least.
You'd have gone through the roof if I told you that he did.
Did you have an affair with Guy Henderson?
I would rather not discuss it if you don't mind.
Answer me. Did you or didn't you?
Of course I didn't.
You let him kiss you, though, didn't you?
How can I stop him? He was bigger than I was.
And you swore to me.
Of course I did. You were always making scenes over nothing at all.
Nothing at all?
You never loved me a bit, really. It was only your beastly vanity.
You seriously believe that it was only vanity that upset me when you went out on the punt with Guy Henderson?
It was not a punt. It was a little launch.
I don't care if it was a three-masted schooner. You had no right to go.
You seem to forget why I went. You seem to forget that you spent the entire evening making sheep's eyes at that overblown harridan with the false pearls.
A woman in Cynthia Cheviot's position would hardly wear false pearls.
They were practically all she was wearing.
I am pained to observe that 7 years in the echoing vaults of eternity have in no way impaired your native vulgarity.
That was a remark of a pompous ass.
There is nothing to be gained by continuing this discussion.
You always used to say that when you were thoroughly versed.
Looking back on our married years, Elvira, I see now with horrid clarity that they were nothing but a mockery.
You invite mockery, Charles. It's something to do with your personality, I think, a certain seedy grandeur.
Once and for all, Elvira!
You never suspected it. But I laughed at you steadily from the altar to the grave. All your ridiculous, petty jealousies and your fussies and fumings.
You were feckless and irresponsible and morally unstable. I realized that before we left Budley Salterton.
Nobody but a monumental bore would have thought of having a honeymoon at Budley Salterton.
What's the matter with Budley Salterton?
I was an eager young bride, Charles. I wanted glamour, music, and romance. All I got was potted palms, 7 hours a day on a damp golf course, and three-piece orchestra playing Merry England.
It's a pity you didn't tell me so at the time.
I did, but you wouldn't listen. That's why I went out with the Moors that day with Captain. I was desperate.
You swore to me that you'd gone over to see your aunt in Exmouth.
It was the Moors.
With Captain Bracegirdle?
With Captain Bracegirdle.
I might have known it. What a fool I was. What a blind fool. Did he make love to you?
Of course.
Oh, Elvira.
Only very discreetly. He was in the cavalry, you know.
Well, all I can say is that I'm well rid of you.
Unfortunately, you're not.
Oh, yes, I am. You're dead, and Ruth's dead. I shall sell this house, lock, stock, and barrel, and go away.
I shall follow you.
I shall go a long way away. I shall go to South America. You'll hate that. You were always such a bad traveler.
That can't be helped. I shall have to follow you. You called me back.
I did not call you back.
Well, somebody did, and it's hardly likely to have been Ruth.
Nothing in the world was further from my thoughts.
You were talking about me before dinner that evening.
I might as well have easily been talking about Joan of Arc. But that wouldn't necessarily mean I wanted her to come and live with me.
As a matter of fact, she's rather fun.
Stick to the point.
When I think of what might have happened if I succeeded in getting you into the other world after all, it makes me shudder. It honestly does. It would have been nothing but bickering and squabbling forever and ever and ever. I swear I would be better off with Ruth. At least she'll find her own set and not get in my way.
So, I get in your way, do I?
Only because I was idiotic enough to imagine that you loved me. And I sort of felt sorry for you.
I'm sick of these insults. Please, go away.
There's nothing I'd like better. I've always believed in cutting my losses. That's why I died.
Of all the brazen sophistry.
Call that old girl in again. Set her to work. I won't tolerate this any longer. I want to go home. Wait.
Give it a read.
Oh, where did I go? I want to go home.
Charles goes below the sofa. Elvira starts to cry.
For heaven's sake, don't snivel.
Call her in. She's got to get me out of this.
I quite agree, and the sooner the better. Madame Arcati, would you please come in now?
Is the darling still here?
Yes, she is.
Where? Tell me where.
Over by the piano, blowing her nose.
Oh, my dear. Oh, my dear.
Stop her fawning on me, Charles, or I shall break something.
Elvira and I have discussed the whole situation, Madame Arcati, and she wishes to go home immediately.
Home?
Wherever she came from.
You don't think she would like to stay a few days longer while I try to get things a little more organized?
No! I want to go now.
I could come and be here with her. I could bring my crystal.
Oh, God forbid.
We are both agreed that she must go as soon as possible. Please, strain every nerve, Madame Arcati. Make every effort. You said something about a formula. What is it?
Well, if you insist.
I most emphatically do insist.
Oh, Charles!
I can't guarantee anything, you know. I'll do my best, but it may not work.
What is the formula?
Nothing more than a little verse, really. It fell into disuse after the 17th century. I shall need some pepper and salt.
There's some pepper and salt in the dining room. I'll get it.
We ought, of course, to have some shepherd's wort and a frog or two, but I think I can manage without. You won't be frightened, dear, will you? It's absolutely painless.
Will this be enough?
Oh, yes, I only need a little. Put it on the table, please. Now then, let me see. Ah, yes. Sprinkle it with you, just a soupçon there, right in the middle.
This is going to be a flop. I can tell that here now.
Now, A few snapdragons out of that vase. There's a good chap.
Here you are.
Marilyn does all this sort of thing at parties and bores us all stiff with it.
Now then, the gramophone. In the old days, of course, we used a zither or reed pipes. We'd better have the same record we had before, I think.
I'll get it.
Whatever you think best, Madam Arcati.
Oh, if only that Mr. Emsworth of the Psychical Research could see this. He'd have a fit, he would, really. Don't start it yet, dear. Now then, sit down, please, Mr. Condamine. Rest your hands on the table, but don't put your fingers in the pepper. I shall turn out the lights myself. Oh, shucks, I'd nearly forgotten. One triangle, one half circle, one little dot. There.
A waste of time.
Anything's worth trying.
I'm as eager for it to succeed as you are. Don't make any mistake about that. But I'll lay you 10 to 1. It's a dead failure.
Now, if your wife would be kind enough to lie down on the sofa.
Go on, Elvira.
This is sheer nonsense. Don't blame me if I get the giggles.
Concentrate and think of nothing.
That's right. Quite right. Hands at the sides, legs extended. Breathe steadily. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Is she comfortable?
Are you comfortable, Elvira?
No.
She's quite comfortable.
I shall join you in a moment, Mr. Condamine. I may have to go into a slight trance, but if I do, pay no attention. Now, first the music, and away we go.
Madame Arcady turns on the gramophone and stands quite still by the side of it with her hands behind her head for a little. Then suddenly, with great swiftness, she runs to the door and switches out the lights. Her form can be dimly discerned, moving about in the darkness. Charles gives a loud sneeze.
Dear, it's the pepper.
Damn.
Hold on to yourself. Concentrate. Ghostly spectre, ghoul or fiend, nevermore be thou convened. Shepherd's wart and holy rite, banish thee into the night.
What a disagreeable little verse.
Be quiet, Elvira.
Shh. Is there anyone there? Is there anyone there? 1 rap for yes, 2 raps for no. Is there anyone there?
The table gives a loud bump.
Aha, good stuff. Is that you, Daphne?
The table gives another bump.
I'm sorry to bother you, dear, but Mrs. Condamine wants to return.
The table bumps several times very quickly.
Now then, Daphne, did you hear what I said?
Table gives a bump.
Can you help us?
Table begins to bump violently without stopping.
Hold tight, Mr. Condamine. It's trying to break away. Oh, oh, oh.
The table falls over with a crash. She falls off the chair and pulls over the table on her.
Oh, what's the matter, Madam Arcati? Are you hurt?
Oh, oh, oh.
What on earth's happening? You hurt, Madam Arcati.
Elvira rises and comes to look at Madame Arcadi. Then she crosses back to the fireplace.
She's in one of her damn trances again. And I'm here as much as I ever was.
For God's sake, wake up!
Leave her alone. She's having a whale of a time.
Oh.
If I ever do get back, I'll strangle the bloody little Daphne.
What happened?
Nothing. Nothing at all.
Oh, yes, it did. I know something happened.
You fell over. That's all that happened.
Is she still here?
Oh, of course she is.
Oh, something must have gone wrong.
Make her do it properly. I'm sick of being messed about like this.
Be quiet. She's doing her best.
Something happened. I sensed it in my trance. I felt it. It shivered through me.
Suddenly, the window curtains blow out almost straight, and Ruth walks into the room. She is still wearing the brightly colored clothes in which we last saw her, but now they are entirely gray. So is her hair and her skin.
Once and for all, Charles, what the hell does this mean?
And the lights fade. Scene 2. When the lights go up again, several hours have elapsed. The doors are shut, the curtains are drawn, the windows are opened. Behind the curtains, the whole room is in slight disarray. There are birch branches and evergreens laid on the floor in front of the doors, and crossed birch branches pinned rather untidily to the curtains. The furniture has been moved about a bit. On the bridge table, there is a pile of playing cards, Madame Arcadie's crystal, and a Ouija board. Also a plate of sandwiches and 2 empty beer mugs. Madame Arcadie is asleep on the sofa, ahead to the fireplace. Ruth is leaning on the mantelpiece. Charles is sitting on the back of the sofa. Elvira is sitting on the piano stool above the seance table.
Well, we've done all we can. I must say, I couldn't be more exhausted.
It'll be daylight soon.
The clock strikes 5 very slowly.
Ugh, that clock's always irritated me. It strikes far too slowly.
It was a wedding present from Uncle Walter.
Who's Uncle Walter?
Elvira's.
Well, all I can say is he might have chosen something a little more decorative.
If that were really all you could say, Ruth, I'm sure it would be a great comfort to us all.
You can be as rude as you like, Elvira. I don't mind a bit. As a matter of fact, I should be extremely surprised if you weren't.
Why?
The reply to that is really too obvious.
I wish you two would stop bickering for 1 minute.
This is quite definitely one of the most frustrating nights I've ever spent.
The reply to that is pretty obvious too.
I'm sure I don't know what you mean.
Skip it.
Now listen to me, Elvira. If you and I have got to stay together indefinitely in this house, and it looks unpleasantly likely, we had better come to some sort of an arrangement.
What sort of an arrangement?
Oh, you're not going to stay indefinitely in this house.
With you, then. We shall have to be with you.
I don't see why. Why don't you take a cottage somewhere?
You called us back.
I've already explained until I'm black in the face that I did nothing of the sort.
Madame Arcati said you did.
Madame Arcati's a muddling old fool.
I could have told you that in the first place.
I think you're behaving very shabbily, Charles.
I don't see what I've done.
We all agreed that as Elvira and I are dead, that it would be both right and proper for us to dematerialize again as soon as possible. That, I admit, we have allowed ourselves to be subjected to the most humiliating hocus-pocus for hours and hours without complaining.
Without complaining?
Shut up! We've lain down. We've concentrated. We've sat interminably while that tiresome old woman recited extremely unflattering verses at us. We've endured 5 seances. We've watched her fling herself in and out of trances until we're dizzy. And at the end of it all, we find ourselves exactly where we were at the beginning.
Well, it's not my fault.
Be that as it may, the least you could do is to admit failure gracefully and try to make the best of it. Your manners are boorish to a degree.
I'm just as exhausted as you are. I've had to do all the damn table topping, remember? Table tapping. Sorry.
Get us back. She can't, and that's that. We shall have to think of something else.
She must get you back. Anything else is unthinkable.
There's gratitude for you.
Gratitude?
Yes, for all the years we both devoted to you, you ought to be ashamed.
What about all the years I've devoted to you?
Nonsense. We've waited on you hand and foot, haven't we, Ruth? You've exceedingly selfish and always were.
In that case, I fail to see why you were both so anxious to get back to me.
You called us back, and you've done nothing but try to get rid of us ever since we came, hasn't he, Elvira?
He certainly has.
And now, owing to your idiotic inefficiency, we find ourselves in the most mortifying position. We're neither fish, flesh, nor fowl, nor whatever it is.
Good red herring.
It can't be.
Well, why don't you do something about it? Why don't you go back on your own?
We can't. You know perfectly well we can't.
Oh, isn't there anyone on the other side that can help?
How do I know? I've only been there a few days. Ask Elvira.
I've already told you this, that it's no good. If we got to cast the Gloucester, Mesmer Merlin, Gil the Rets, and the Black Douglas in a row, they couldn't do a thing. The impetus has got to come from here. Perhaps Charles doesn't want us to go quite enough.
Oh, I certainly do.
Well, you must have a very weak will then. I always suspected it.
It's no use arguing anymore. Wake up, Madame Arcati.
Oh, not another seance, please. Not another seance.
Please wake up, Madame Arcati.
Oh, shake her.
It might upset her.
I don't care if it kills her.
Please wake up, Madame Arcati.
Oh, what time is it?
5:10.
What time did I go off?
Over an hour ago.
Curious, very curious. Forgive me for a moment. I must make a note of that for my diary. Are they still here?
Yes.
How disappointing.
Have you any suggestions?
We mustn't give up hope. Chin chin, chin up, never give in. That's my motto.
This schoolgirl phraseology's driving me mad.
Now then.
Now then what?
What do you say we have another seance and really put our shoulders to the wheel, make it a real rouser?
For God's sake, not another seance.
I might be able to materialize the trumpet if I tried hard enough. Or better than nothing, you know. I feel as fit as a fiddle after my rest.
I don't care if she materializes the whole symphony orchestra. I implore you not to let her have another seance.
Don't you think, Madame Arcati, that perhaps we've had enough seances? After all, they haven't achieved much, have they?
Rome wasn't built in a day, you know.
Oh, I know it wasn't, but...
Away with melancholy.
Now, listen, Madame Arcati, before you go off into any further trances, I really think we ought to discuss the situation a little.
Good, an excellent idea. And while we're doing it, I shall have another of those delicious sandwiches. I'm as hungry as a hunter.
Would you like some more beer?
No, thank you, better not.
Very well, I think I'll have a small whiskey and soda.
Make it a double. Enjoy yourself.
One day I intend to give myself the pleasure of telling Madame Arcati exactly what I think of her.
She's been doing her best.
Are the girls getting despondent?
I'm afraid they are, rather.
We'll win through yet. Don't be downhearted.
If we're not very careful, she'll materialize a hockey team.
Now then, Mr. Condamine, the discussion. Fire away.
Well, my wives and I have been talking it over, and they're both absolutely convinced that I somehow or other called them back.
Very natural.
I am convinced that I did not.
Love is a strong psychic force, Mr. Condamine. It can work untold miracles. A true love call can encompass the universe.
I'm sure it can, but I must confess to you that, frankly, although my affection for both Elvira and Ruth is of the warmest, I cannot truthfully feel that it would come under the heading of that you describe.
I should think not, indeed.
You may not know your own strength, Mr. Condamine.
I did not call them back, either consciously or subconsciously.
But Mr. Condamine.
That is my final word on the subject.
Neither of them could have appeared unless there had been somebody, a psychic subject, in the house who wished for them.
Well, it wasn't me.
Perhaps it was Dr. Bradman. I never knew he cared.
Are you sure? Are you really sure?
Absolutely positive.
Great Scott! I believe I've been barking up the wrong tree.
How do you mean?
The Sudbury case.
I don't understand.
There's no reason why you should. It was before your day. I wonder. Oh, I wonder.
What was the Sudbury case? I wish you'd explain.
It was the case that made me famous, Mr. Condamine. It was what you might describe in theatrical parlance as my first smash hit. I had letters from all over the world about it, especially India.
What did you do?
I dematerialized old Lady Sudbury after she'd been firmly entrenched in the private chapel for over 17 years.
How? Can you remember how?
Chance, a fluke. I happened on it by the merest coincidence.
What fluke? What was it?
Wait, all in good time. Now, let me see. Who was in the house during our first seance?
Only the Bradmans, Ruth, and me and yourself.
Oh, yes, to be sure. But the Bradmans weren't here last night, were they?
No.
Quickly, my crystal.
Here.
Damn the thing, it gives me the pip. It's cloudy again. Ah, that's better. It's there again. It's there again. I'm beginning to understand.
I wish I was. What's there again?
A bandage, a white bandage. Hold on to a white bandage.
I haven't got a white bandage. I haven't got a white bandage.
Oh, she's too good, you know. You ought to be in a circus.
Be you in nook or cranny, answer me. Be you in still room or closet, answer me. Be you behind the panel, above the stairs, beneath the eaves, waking or sleeping, answer me. That ought to do it, or I'm a Dutchman.
What?
Hush, wait.
Madame Arcady crosses to the window and picks up a bunch of garlic and crosses to the writing desk, making cabalistic signs. She picks up one of the birch branches and waves it solemnly to and fro.
Oh, for God's sake, don't let her throw any more of that garlic about. Nearly made me sick last time.
Would you like the gramophone on or the lights out or anything?
No, it's near. It's very near.
If it's a ghost, I shall scream.
Oh, I hope it's nobody we know. I shall feel so silly.
Suddenly the door opens and Edith comes into the room. She is wearing a pink flannel dressing gown and bedroom slippers. Her head is bandaged.
Did you ring, sir?
The bandage, the white bandage.
No, Edith.
I'm sorry, sir. I could have sworn I heard the bell or somebody calling. I was asleep. I don't rightly know which it was.
Come here, child.
Oh.
Go on. Go to Madame Arcady. It's quite all right.
Whom do you see in this room, child?
Oh, dear.
Answer, please.
You, madam?
Go on.
The master?
Anyone else?
Oh, no, madam.
Look again.
I don't understand, sir.
Come, child, don't beat about the bush. Look again.
Elvira moves across the fireplace below the sofa, almost as though she were being pulled. Ruth follows. Both stand at the fire. Elvira upstage. Edith follows them with her eyes.
Do concentrate, Elvira, and keep still.
I can't.
Do you see anyone else now?
Oh, no, madam.
She's lying.
Oh, madam.
They always do.
They?
Where are they now?
By the fireplace. Oh!
She can't see them. Do you mean she can see them?
Probably not very clearly, but enough.
Let me go. I haven't done nothing, nor seen nobody. Let me go to bed.
Give her a sandwich.
Oh, I don't want a sandwich. I want to go back to bed.
Here, Edith.
Nonsense. A big, healthy girl like you saying no to a delicious sandwich? I never heard of such a thing. Sit down.
Please, sir,
Please do as Madame Arcati says, Edith.
I haven't done nothing wrong.
Oh, it's all right. Nobody said you had.
Oh, if she's been the cause of all this unpleasantness, I'll give her a week's notice tomorrow.
You may not be here tomorrow.
Look at me, Edith. Cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo.
Oh dear, what's the matter with her? Is she balmy?
Here, Edith, this is my finger. Look. Have you ever seen such a long, long, long finger? Look, now it's on the right, now it's on the left. Backwards and forwards it goes, see? Very quietly, backwards and forwards. Tick, tock, tick, tock, tick, tock.
The mouse ran up the clock.
Be quiet, you'll ruin everything.
Well, so far so good. She's off all right.
Off?
She's a natural. Just the same as the Sudbury case. It really is the most amusing coincidence. Now then, would you ask your wives to stand close together, please?
Where?
Over there, by you.
Elvira, Ruth.
I resent being ordered about like this.
I don't like this at all. I don't like any of it. I feel peculiar.
I'm afraid I must insist.
It would serve you right if we flatly refused to do anything at all.
Are you sorry for having been so mischievous, Edith?
Oh, yes, madam.
You know what you have to do now, don't you, Edith?
Oh, yes, madam.
I believe it's going to work, whatever it is. Oh, Charles.
Shh.
This is goodbye, Charles.
Tell her to stop for a minute. There's something I want to say before I go.
You should have thought of that before. It's too late now.
All the mean, ungracious...
Charles, listen a moment.
Lights!
Madame Arcady rushes to the door and switches off the lights. In the dark, Edith is singing always in a very high Cockney voice. Elvira and Ruth both go through the window.
I saw Captain Bracegirdle again, Charles, several times. I went to the 400 with him twice when we were in Nottingham, and I must say I couldn't have enjoyed it more.
Don't think you're getting rid of us quite so easily, my dear. You may not be able to see us, but we shall be here, all right. I consider that you have behaved atrociously over the whole miserable business, and I should like to say here and now...
Splendid! Hurrah! We've done it! Oh, that's quite enough singing for the moment, Edith.
Shall I put on the lights?
No, I will.
They're gone. They've really gone.
Yes, I think we've really pulled it off this time.
You'd better wake her up, hadn't you? She might bring them back again.
Wake up, child.
Good heavens, where am I?
Oh, it's all right, Edith. You can go back to bed now.
Why, it's morning.
Yes, I know it is.
But I was in bed. How did I get down here?
I rang, Edith. I rang the bell and you answered it, didn't I, Madame Arcati?
Did I drop off? Do you think it's my concussion again? Oh dear.
Off you go, Edith, and thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed.
Oh, sir, whatever for? Oh, sir!
What on earth did she mean by that?
Golly, what a night. I'm ready to drop in my tracks.
Well, would you like to stay here? There's a spare room, you know.
No, thank you. Each to his own nest. I'll pedal home in a jiffy. It's only 7 miles.
I'm deeply grateful to you, Madame Arcati. I don't know what arrangements you generally make, but I trust you will send in your account in due course.
Good heavens, Mr. Condamine. It was a pleasure. I wouldn't dream of such a thing.
But really, I feel that all those trances...
I enjoy them, Mr. Condamine, thoroughly. I always have, since a child.
Oh, perhaps you'd give me the pleasure of lunching with me one day.
When you come back, I should be delighted.
Come back?
Take my advice, Mr. Condamine, and go away immediately.
But, Madame Arcadi, you don't mean that...
This must be an unhappy house for you. There must be memories both grave and gay in every corner of it. Also
what?
There are more things in heaven and earth, Mr. Condamine. Just go. Pack your traps and go as soon as possible.
Do you mean they may still be here?
Quien sabe, as the Spanish say.
I wonder. I'll follow your advice, Madame Arcadi. Thank you again.
Well, goodbye, Mr. Condamine. It's been fascinating. From first to last, fascinating. Oh, do you mind if I take just one more sandwich to munch on my way home?
Oh, by all means.
But don't trouble, I can find my way. Cheerio once more, and good hunting.
Ruth? Elvira? Are you there? Ruth? Elvira? I know damn well you're there. I just want to tell you that I'm going away, so there's no point in your hanging about any longer. I'm going a long way away, somewhere where I don't believe you'll be able to follow me. In spite of what Elvira said, I don't think spirits can travel over water. Is that quite clear, my darlings? You said in one of your more acid moments, Ruth, that I had been hag-ridden all my life. How right you were. But now I'm free. Ruth, dear, not only of Mother and Elvira and Mrs. Winthrop Llewellyn, but free of you too. And I should like to take this farewell opportunity of saying I'm enjoying it immensely.
The vase on the mantelpiece falls off the hearthstone and smashes.
I thought so. You were very silly, Elvira, to imagine that I didn't know all about you and Captain Bracegirdle. I did. But what you didn't know, that I was extremely attached to Paula Westlake at the time.
The picture above the piano crashes to the ground.
I was reasonably faithful to you, Ruth, but I doubt if it would have lasted much longer. You are becoming increasingly domineering, you know, and there's nothing more off-putting than that, is there?
The clock strikes 16 very quickly.
Well, goodbye for the moment, my dears. I expect we are bound to meet again one day, but until we do, I'm going to... She disappeared.
Oh,
there she is. There she is.
My internet went out.